See her, we'll see her. What do you think? Yeah.
I almost skip this meeting.
Do we have the Smith boys?
Well, you think the great one have.
You better put this on.
Good set.
You know, when this was.
Tell me when.
Live on YouTube, we're recording and you can start.
You ready? Lindsay's coming out there. I'll wait for her. But of course, she has to hear it from Louis first.
Yep. Thank you. You know how often I will tell you wrong, Terry. It's certainly manic.
It's. No. I don't even have a color.
This one's mine. Go take mine. Don't forget to grab food, guys. Don't forget to go get food. I mean, there's a form right here,
Yeah.
Lindsay's.
getting food.
Food for her face.
Next year, where?
I mean, you do have.
At Traverse City.
Let's go.
Grand Traverse. I think.
Welcome. City of Petoskey meeting for the City Council. This is a special session for October 27th, 2025. And I ask that you rise with me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk Beck, would you please call roll for City Council first?
Demore,
Present.
Shields,
Present.
Knocktrab is absent, but joining online. Walker. Present. Murphy.
We have a quorum. This is for new business, and it's to hear a training presentation from the Michigan Municipal League representatives covering topics concerning public meetings. I'm going to turn it over to the gentleman.
Hang on, before you do that, Mayor, I have a couple of things I'd want to,
Okay,
we can dismiss council to go join.
we are going to,
everyone.
yes.
Still, oh, that
Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, thank you very much for participating this evening. I know sometimes when we have special meetings, my hope is that it's a nasty, terrible, rainy day. And there's nothing else to do, but unfortunately, it's another beautiful Northern Michigan evening. So I guess my apologies for that. But thank you for taking the time, the investment of your time, coming out to hopefully for some of you, this may be a little bit of review. For others, maybe this is information you've heard for the very first time. When I transitioned out of high school I started in community college, just taking some early classes, just try to save some money. But one of my professors very early on that imprinted on me very early was he was a very visual person, which I'm a visual learner as well. Maybe some of you can relate to that, but he gave each of us a toy dinosaur, just I think mine was a T-Rex or whatever. It doesn't really matter what the variety was, but his emphasis was we need to become continuous learners, always learning, always challenging ourselves to learn something new and take that next step in your learning journey. So when we stop learning, we'll become extinct like the dinosaur, essentially. So I had that on my desk. I've had that on my desk for a while. We've moved a few times and I can't find it currently, but that's one of those things that has imprinted on me. So I would encourage you to kind of take that same mentality. Let's always think that there's new things for us to learn. My wife sometimes jokes that when I go to the beach and I'm typically reading a self-help book of some sort, a leadership book, an autobiography, she's into her, the beach reads that, would be more typical. But so it's just something that I've always tried to do. Always tried to see what's new and creative and new ways to do things, because I think there's always something for us to learn. So I appreciate our representatives here. I asked Bob when he called and checked in on me last week about a bio. They just said, well, we'll give you a bio as we're talking. But Chris Johnson is going to start us off. Chris is the general counsel for the Michigan Municipal League. I've heard both these gentlemen speak at Michigan Municipal League conventions. They're very well versed in their subject matter. So I'm anxious to hear what they have to say to all of us. And again, keep an open, receptive mind. Some of you, again, may have heard this before, or maybe it's stuff you've known throughout the course of your careers, but some of you it'll be new. So hopefully you'll grasp that. Hopefully you've grabbed on your way in a packet. A manila folder has both hard copies of the presentations in those packets. So if you didn't grab one, feel free to grab one. There's a sign-up sheet going around as well. Before you leave, make sure that you sign in, because we need to send that back into the Municipal League as well. And then before we leave as well, there's a, what are we calling that? Valuation. Thank you, Chris. So there's just a one-pager, very simple, for you to kind of give continuous feedback, which I think we all learn from that as well. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. And this is a very casual environment this evening. So feel free to get up, grab some food, grab a drink, use the facilities. If you're getting sore from sitting, feel free to stand up for a while in the back. I think these folks are both very casual and would appreciate that. So Chris, I'm over to you.
Well, good evening. Again, thank you for being here, because it is important to run your community in the best way you can. I have an interesting background. I practiced municipal law for about 35 years, even with my own law firm. Represented every kind of government you can think of, including employees of the state of Michigan. In addition to that, I'm a recovering politician. I spent 28 years as the mayor of my community and 12 years on the school board before that. So it just shows you I'm a real glutton for punishment. I kind of wanted, can you?
Yep, you should be out. There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk a little bit about the MML first. The Municipal League is an entity that's made up of about 550 cities, villages, and a few urban townships in the state of Michigan from all 83 counties. We're trying to give people resources to make their jobs better. There's one thing that I really recommend you do, and that's sign up for our Inside 208 blog. This particular blog talks about everything going on in Lansing especially, and some of what's going on in Washington as well. It's actually done by our legislative team. I've got those folks listed. But if, the budget gets signed, there's a description of what they actually did. And it's up to date, almost sometimes up to the minute. Another thing we have is an inquiry service. So you may have specific research needs. You need to know a model ordinance on whatever topic it might be. And our inquiry service can get back to you with that information, usually within a day. We have fact sheets on various topics. We have over 70 on the website right now. And it'll go through all those things, like including FOIA and the Open Meetings Act, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. There we go. We also have primers that are available through the website. So municipal officials and general law villages are so significantly different that we have a separate handbook for them. But you can go to the website mml.org and download these, and it's a remarkable service. Okay, technology is a wonderful thing when it works. So today we're going to talk about what are the origins of local government, what are its powers and forms. We're also going to talk about the role of the council, the mayor, and the administration. So all those things are very important. One thing you have to realize is that local government is constantly changing. We are subject to the legislative whims. We're subject to court opinions which try to interpret what the statute says. And finally, we're subject to public opinion. Now, in my small community, if we had 50 people show up for a meeting, we knew we were going to hear about what we did wrong. It's just the nature of things. So that public opinion will influence some of your decision-making. What kind of governments do we have in this state? Well, we have counties, and they have delegated powers only. Counties can do anything that the statute says they can do, but if it's not in the statute or fairly implied out of the statute, they can't do it. And courts really narrowly interpret that. We have 83 counties in Michigan. Anybody here in all 83 counties? Well, I am one of those persons and never ran for a statewide office. So we're a small group. We have cities, 280 cities, different kinds. A home rule, fourth class, fifth class, and we have one special charter city in this state. And for the trivia challenge, it's the city of Mackinac Island. They're special because they have a special charter. We have villages, 253 villages in this state, and there's two kinds. Home rule village and general law village, and they operate significantly differently. And by the way, if you think we hate government in Michigan, you're wrong. You're just wrong. We have so much government, you can't believe it. Townships, 1,240 townships in this state. And 138 of them are charter townships. That's kind of a misnomer. They don't actually have a charter. They have a different statute that they operate under. And then we have all these special purpose units of government, things like school districts, over 500 school districts, intermediate school districts, library districts, sanitation authorities. It's endless. Police and fire authorities. And all these have governmental powers. They have ways of funding themselves. And it's not just run by the city. Your ordinances are the equivalent of a state statute. It's the law of this community. So the ordinances are very important. You also have a situation where if you want the particular item to be law in the state or in your city, you have to pass it as an ordinance.
Make sure, point it back to the back wall. There. Sorry. That's where the computer's at. So if you point it back there, it might work better.
Okay. Now, the city of Petoskey has a charter, and that's your governing document. And I urge you all to read it and know it, because that's how things flow. Section 1.3 of the charter lays out the kind of government it is, which is a manager-council form of government, and also the roles and responsibilities of the mayor. The council are spelled out in Chapter 4 of the charter. Chapter 5 of the charter spells out the responsibilities of the city manager, city attorney, city assessor, the city clerk, and city treasurer. And it also provides that some of these offices can be combined into one position as well. Also provides for an acting city manager, which is a good thing if the manager can't be there at a certain time. But remember your limitations. You're not responsible for other units of government. And sometimes you want to just take on that responsibility. Somebody calls you up about fireworks ordinances. Well, you can't pass those. The state of Michigan has preempted you. So if you have a person complaining about fireworks going off at a particular time, send them to the state legislature. Don't take that on as your responsibility. Ah,
Yeah.
there we go.
One too many, I think. There you go.
Okay. Understanding your role is really important, and it's really important because you do have a role in the community. The city council, first of all, is the policymaking body of the city. You're responsible for long-term and short-term goals. You're also responsible for adopting a budget and a capital outlay plan. One of the most important things you should be doing is to make sure you're syncing your goals and objectives with your budget. You know, it's great to have a program or an idea that you want to fix the damn roads. That's real nice. It's laudable. But if you only put $1.98 in the budget, you're not going to fix anything. You're just going to watch it deteriorate. And you can only act as a body through your resolutions and ordinances. Resolutions give you the sense of where the community is going, but ordinances are the law of the city, and that's very important. The council should and can adopt rules of procedure. How are you going to conduct business on a day-to-day basis? And Bob's going to cover a lot of that in a little bit. There we go.
You want me to click through?
Yeah, go ahead. Next slide. Okay, as I've mentioned before, council members can only act as a body. They can't be individually coming in and directing the staff to do stuff. And that's not your role as a council member. And it's really important to note that you have to provide a majority of the council to give direction to the manager and the administration. You can't do it all by yourself. Hey, I want you to do that. No, don't do that. That's somebody else. The whole council agrees that you're going to fix the damn roads and puts enough money in the budget, then the council's doing that. And that's clear direction to the administration. But if one person walks in the manager's office and said, I want, well, guess what? That's not kosher. Next slide. Now, the responsibilities of the mayor or presiding officer for like the planning commission or something along that line, there's certain things you really need to do. First, you have to acknowledge the members that are wanting to speak and call on them individually, because you can't have three people talking at the same time. Nobody can process that kind of information. It's important for the person to be courteous and with not only the members of the council, but also to the members of the public. When I was on the school board at the beginning of my first term, we had a person who was the president of the school board who was basically an old curmudgeon. He was just nasty to people. And the school district got a reputation for being a nasty place to work. And it started off from the chair of the school board who just couldn't, well, he just wasn't a nice person. It's very important to fairly, follow the rules that you have and always follow those rules fairly. Apply them to everybody the same. You don't let Sam talk for 2 minutes and then Emily over here talks for 25 minutes. You just don't do that. Members of the public will notice if you're not being fair in the chair. And really important too, to follow, if we go back one, follow the public portion, public comment portion of the meeting and fairly enforce those rules. Again, if you have a 3-minute rule, a 5-minute rule, whatever it is, make sure everybody stays to that. You don't give David 22 minutes and Emily only gets 2. That is not going to work. Go ahead.
Chris, can I interrupt real quick? I didn't mention this, but do you prefer, if you're moving along, can they ask questions as you go? Or do you
Oh,
want to
absolutely. If you got a question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. So You know, sometimes you get a question during public comment and it's simple to answer. Hey, when does that program start? And you know it starts on May the 1st. You can say, yeah, May the 1st. But don't get into arguments during public comment. Nobody wins an argument with a council. You know, it's just getting things all heated up. You know, it's public comment time. It's a time for the public to let you know what's going on in their minds, how you are doing. It is not a debate like they have in the House of Commons in England. So the presiding officer, you know, when they get to the end of their 3 minutes or whatever time limit you have, you can say, thank you for your comment, and then move on, call on someone else. Next slide. So what kind of communications does council need to have with its administrators? Well, what kind of information do you need? Do you need this, you know, critical infrastructure? Absolutely. How about where the budget priorities are? Again, absolutely. Council should know about those things. Do you really need to know where you buy the pencils? You're going to send the manager off on a, you know, half-hour excursion just to figure out where you're buying the pencils? That's wasting people's time. And if the information is important to you, it should probably be important to every member of the council or the board. Now, that's really important because playing gotcha at a meeting is really self-defeating. I had a council member for only one term, thank you. And that council member would always try to pick on our finance director, assistant city manager. And he'd ask some of the most off-the-wall questions trying to trap her into a wrong answer. And she would always turn it around on him and say, well, Mr. Council Member, if you'd read your packet and see page 32 of the budget, line item 4, those are your $3,000. Now, who looked like the idiot? The council member did. And not only that, he destroyed a good personal relationship with a staff member that could have assisted him later on. She going to help him out again? Not on your life. So don't play gotcha. Next slide. As I mentioned before, you need to act as a body. And that means you need your fellow council members to accomplish some of your goals. So if you're mean and nasty to a fellow council member, do you think you're going to get their vote? Because you still need a majority on your board or commission or your council. Extend those basic courtesies to people. If you're going to get respect, you have to give respect. And falling into the gutter with, you know, trash talk and things like that, you're just going to make an enemy as opposed to getting your position through. Next slide. One of the most important things about ethics really is appearance. It's how you appear to your public. Next slide. There's an Institute for Local Government, and they have 4 specific items that they think will give you a good ethical background. The first is don't benefit financially from your position. And I'm not talking about the little stipend you might get per meeting or, you know, a yearly salary that I got of $600 a year for being mayor. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is getting a contract for your spouse or your company that you work for is putting a bid on the snow removal service. You got to back off of that kind of situation immediately, disclose it, and not take part in the discussion or the vote on something like that. Also, you shouldn't receive special benefits from your position. Walk into a restaurant and expect to get a free meal just because you're a council member? Well, first of all, in your community, that news would get around real fast, and people don't like that. In my community, I live on Main Street, and people would always say, oh, they do the Mayor's Street first. Well, that was true, except for the fact that the fire station was on Main Street, and that's why it was the first street to get plowed. And actually, my driveway went out, I was on a corner, and it goes out to West Street, and guess what? It was one of the last ones to get plowed. So, just don't expect that your street should be plowed first because you're a council member. Next slide. This is important too. Don't be secretive in your decision-making. I'm going to go through the Open Meetings Act in a little bit, and the Open Meetings Act assures you that you don't be secretive. And finally, don't let favoritism or bias cloud your decision-making. And I can remember we'd had like 6 months worth of meetings working on a particular problem. And we all thought we had the greatest solution there. We were all real proud of it. We're having a public hearing. And a gentleman gets up in the back and says, "Hey, did you ever think of doing it this way?" And we kind of looked at each other and no, we hadn't thought of that at all. Well, guess who was on the committee the next day? And we ended up using a lot of his suggestions as he went through it. But we had to step back, and even though we thought we had the ultimate solution, this guy had a better solution. Next one. So ethics can also be summed up by what you had the right to do is not necessarily what is right to do. So always maintain that perspective. Step back once in a while and say, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it good for our community? Next slide. And ethics in social media kind of give you some problems, especially if you're running your own Facebook page or some other social media page. Don't represent your personal opinion as the city's opinion. If the council passes a resolution or a ordinance, that's one thing. That's the city doing it. But if you just want to, do something on your own, make sure you say it is my opinion. This is what we need to do. In my opinion, not the city's opinion. You should also be aware that the U.S. Supreme Court on a Michigan matter recently said that Facebook pages, even ones that were personal to start off with, if they become a conduit for public information and debate, could turn your own Facebook page into a public source where you have to follow a different set of rules. And talk with your city attorney for guidance on that, because the Supreme Court actually remanded it back, and it's going all the way back to the district court for findings of fact, which hadn't been done in the case originally. So keep up with your city attorney on that. Next slide. So now we get to the fun stuff, the sunshine laws. Next slide. First one we're going to talk about is the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. And it was a result of a scandal, which was Watergate. Next slide. There were two things that the Michigan legislature did, and they call it the sunshine laws. First was the Freedom of Information Act, and second was the Open Meetings Act. Next slide. So here's the policy of the Freedom of Information Act. All persons are entitled to information so they become, knowing what's going on in their community. And quote, the courts are really diligent about making sure as much information goes out as possible. This Ritage versus City of Romulus case, the people shall be informed so that they may participate in the democratic process. So that's really interesting stuff. Next slide. So what is a public record? Well, it's a writing which is prepared and used in the possession of or retained by the public body, in your case, the city or a planning commission or somewhere in the administration, from the time it was created. Next slide. And they've defined writing, and it had all the things in 1976 you'd think of: handwriting, typewriting, printing, photostatting. Remember that? I do. Photocopying, and down here at the end, or other means of recording or retaining meaningful content. So why do we get this very, very broad definition of writing? Next slide. because this person was the secretary to President Nixon. And that allegedly was the position she was in when she accidentally erased 18 and a half minutes of the Watergate tape, which ultimately led to his resignation. So the Michigan legislature made this as broad as possible. Next slide. Oh, what significance is this? Well, the courts in Michigan have filled this all in. So it includes paper, but it now includes email, text, voicemail, and entries on a mobile data terminal, which are things that the police department uses instead of being on the radio. The legislature never has gone back and really done a good job of amending it for technology. And I'll talk about the one time they did that with the Open Meetings Act. But the courts have really filled this in and said, all this stuff now is subject to a FOIA request. Next slide. So as a city council, you have one responsibility for FOIA, and that is to appoint a FOIA coordinator. I'll give you a little practical advice, not legal advice. Do not appoint a procrastinator as your FOIA coordinator because you got very tight timelines. You have to provide reasonable access to city's documents and reasonable protection of those documents. So somebody wants to look up the minutes of the May 1st meeting, they can come into City Hall and take a look, but make sure you babysit your documents. Don't let that person get on an eraser and change the nays to ayes and ayes to nays. You know, we've seen people do stupid things like that. And I just want to warn you, if you're actually allowing somebody to look at it, you've got to babysit those documents. Next section. Basically, you have 5 business days to respond to a FOIA request. 5 business days. And I can tell you from representing local units of government all the time, judges know how to count. So they'll be sitting there, Mr. Johnson, can't your client count? 1, 2, 3. Well, that's pretty embarrassing, but probably more embarrassing for my client that's sitting, right behind me. And you get one 10-day extension. These are business days. If it's a large request. So it's really important that whoever gets the FOIA request, turn it over to the FOIA coordinator immediately because the clock is ticking. One business day after they send that email to somebody in the city, just move it to the FOIA coordinator. I'm guessing that's your lucky responsibility. Yes.
FOIA, have to be notified that the FOIA person is going to use their 10-day extension.
Yes, if you're going to need the 10-day extension, they have to be notified of it. Now, you don't have to compile or create a document. I've seen requests, especially from the media. We want you to give me a list of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, you don't have that in one document in the city. You can just say that document doesn't exist. We don't have it. We never compiled it. And they really want to do or have you do the research for them. Next slide. Here are some common exceptions that cities often use on FOIA. Bid documents. Boy, I would love to know what the bid from the other company is because I'm going to come in $30 under it and I'm going to get the job. Test questions and answers. For example, I would have loved to have known what the questions were on my bar exam, or better yet, what the answers were going to be too. So those are exempt. Tentative bargaining agreements are exempt until they've been ratified by both parties. And finally, the Crime Victims' Rights Act actually allows a lot of new things where, Channel 7 News comes in. I want those photographs of that really terrible auto accident on Main Street. Well, guess what? It has victims in it, and they are entitled to privacy, and the Crime Victims Act gives that to them. Next one. Another common FOIA exception is the attorney-client privilege. Now, early on, when FOIA was still fairly new, we had some creative city managers that would copy the city attorney. That's not what I'm talking about. A real attorney-client document is the city has an issue. So that you write your attorney and say, hey, these are the problems we're facing. How do we deal with this? City attorney writes back and says, you can do A, B, C, or D. Don't do E because that would be illegal. So that's an attorney-client privilege document, and so was the letter that went to the city attorney in the first place. City can waive that if they want, but it belongs in the first instance to the city. Next slide. Another significant exception is the invasion of privacy. And there's cases all over the map on this. So this is really one area that isn't as easy to deal with. Best example I can think of is a fire department person wearing a body cam, and they go in to deal with a person who slipped in a shower and hit their head. Well, obviously, they're not going to wear clothes, while they're in the shower, and Channel 7 News wants to have it all over the TV. They don't get that because that's clearly an invasion of privacy. Next slide. Personnel records are not exempt in general. There's a few things that are exempt within the contents of a personnel file. Somebody wants a copy of, the teacher's personnel file, they'll get it. However, certain information in that file is confidential and needs to be redacted. Things like medical records, counseling records, psychological records, and social security numbers. And quite frankly, now with the age of, online banking, the banking information would be exempt as well. Next slide. Now, police records have their whole separate exemption, and basically investigative records are exempt if you can show that the release of those documents would interfere with the law enforcement proceedings. Operational plans. The bad guys would really like to know how your police department is going to handle an active shooter at the high school. So you don't give that information out. And generally, not to everything, but generally the personnel records of law enforcement officers are exempt. Why? Well, the bad guys always think that it's the officer that made them go to jail, not the fact that they committed a crime. It's just that nature and that wanting to get back at somebody. So that exemption exists. Next slide. In 1976, this was science fiction. What? A computer that can sit on a desk or in my lap? I mean, that's real science fiction. I remember in 1976 going to the computer lab at the University of Michigan. We'd go in with these cards, and woe be to you if you got one of them out of order. The room would be bigger than this, maybe twice or three times the size of this room. This was pure science fiction. Also 1976, next slide. A handheld communicator? Dick Tracy had one, on his watch, and Star Trek had one, with their little communicators. But in 1976, that was all it was, science fiction. And unfortunately, state law hasn't really caught up with the fact that this kind of technology exists. Next slide, please. So remember, FOIA was passed in 1976. There was no such thing as email, text messaging, or social media. That just hadn't existed yet. And even though the state hasn't amended the FOIA to deal with all these things, the courts have filled that all in. So email, text messaging, et cetera, is now something that a citizen can request through FOIA. Next slide. Again, the court cases are clearly bringing it within the definition of a writing. So how about your voicemail or your personal computer or your personal smartphone? Good questions. There's a case out there. Next slide. Howell Education Association versus the Howell Board of Education. What happened in this case was that the school board gave the teachers the absolute right to use the email system. Email was fairly new at that time. So one enterprising Howell citizen says, you know what, school, I want to have a copy of every single email that's on your system. Well, not only was that a lot, but the school board attorney takes a look at it and he can't find any of the exemptions that fit neatly into getting all those things exempt. So the Court of Appeals in that case actually comes up with a brand new concept called purely personal communication. And that purely personal communication included things like, hey, the meeting's running late, would you pick Junior up from daycare? Or on your way home, would you please get some milk and bread? Or this meeting's going late, let's go get dinner after the meeting. And many of these kinds of things. They also dealt with arbitrations if there had been unfair labor practices or different violations of a contract. So they told the union they could communicate via the email system. So the Court of Appeals in that case comes up with this definition that's not in the statute called purely personal communications. And they put all of those things in that category. The back and forth on negotiations, on arbitrations, you know, dinner plans, everything basically.
So it's to decide what's merely personal communication.
That will be your FOIA coordinator. Yeah. She'll have to make a determination on that. Sometimes she should call the city attorney and say, this is kind of, I don't know about this one, and get some additional help. And that's what the attorney's there for. But one of the most important takeaways is that where the message is stored is not as important as what the message is about. So if it relates to city business, even just tangentially, it's probably going to be discoverable under a FOIA request. And if the only place that exists is on your computer because you haven't been using the city's email system, there's a good chance a judge will say, turn over your computer or your smartphone, and we're going to clone the hard drive, and we're going to have this expert go through it. And it's happened in communities that way. Yeah, sure.
So does that mean then that there's a FOIA request for a matter involving the city? And that FOIA request goes out to any one of us in this room, that we have an affirmative duty to check our texts and our personal emails to see if there's any substance in there that would be responsive to that FOIA request.
Yes.
Thank you.
And what's interesting, I strongly recommend you use a city email address and do all your business on that city email. Why? Because the FOIA coordinator is going to be able to go into the computer and find all the back and forth. But if it's on your AOL account or your Gmail account and it's not in the city system at all, you might have things going back and forth with a citizen on a significant issue. But those people know that you've been doing back and forth. So you can't go in and say, oh, I don't have it anymore. That won't fly because there's ways of getting all that stuff back. Just ask Mayor Kilpatrick in the city of Detroit. He thought when he deleted those texts, it was gone. And it's not. Also, kind of as a warning, don't hit reply until you've thought about it, especially if somebody's making you mad, because you say stupid things when you're mad. Next. We have a lot of resource materials on FOIA. Again, at mml.org, you can look up Freedom of Information Act and There's 4 or 5 fact sheets in there for you to take a review. If you really want to get down deep, there's a publication called Michigan Municipal Law, and it's chapter 5 of that document. That's what municipal attorneys use as their Bible, basically. It's got all sorts of different areas, but chapter 5 of that goes into the Michigan Sunshine Laws and is a real good treatise on what's happening. Next slide. Part 2, the Open Meetings Act. Next. Again, we're here because of Watergate and the way that the legislature wanted to open up government to its citizens. Next slide. Here's the actual language of the statute, and I kind of like to point this out to people. It includes a board, commission, committee, and subcommittee. And by the way, you can have a subcommittee of 2 people if they've been charged with, doing something specifically for the community. In the early days of the Open Meetings Act, everybody was focused on, do I have a quorum? We have a 7-person council. As long as we only have 3, we don't have a quorum and we don't have to worry about the Open Meetings Act. Wrong. All the cases since just debunked that idea completely. You can have a subcommittee of 2 people. So assume when 2 of you are getting together as a committee to do some function, or 3 of you, it isn't the fact that you have a quorum, it's because you're a committee or subcommittee of the city council. Next slide. Again, the basic intent of the act is right in the statute. It's to strengthen the right of all Michigan citizens to know what their local government is doing. And the judicial view is really consistent. Look at this language. We do not countenance the use of strained legalisms or evasions to undermine the OMA to promote open and responsible government. That's right directly from a case. And you can see that they are no nonsense when it comes to violating the Open Meetings Act. Next slide, please. So unless there's a specific statutory exception, all meetings have to be open to the public. And even if you could go into closed session to consider something, you still have to take action out in the public meeting. You can't decide it in the closed session. And there's essentially 6 reasons out there for local governments to go into closed session. There's a laundry list of hundreds, well, not hundreds, but dozens of reasons to have a closed session, but 6 really apply to local government. Next slide. So this is also important case law to understand. Deliberation. When you're deliberating toward a decision, any discussion toward that decision is deliberation and comes within the scope of the Open Meetings Act. And it can be the act of carefully considering options or reasons before making a decision. Send it off to the committee. Let them make the recommendation of the 3 best ideas out there. That's going to require an Open Meetings Act. Next slide. And there's a famous U of M case where the regents broke up into little groups of 3. They had a 9-member board, and the president and the board chair would go around to the 3 separate meetings. And the court said, no, you're just trying to avoid the Open Meetings Act, and overturned the action that the Board of Regents took in that. So a real key in this situation is the delegation of authority. What authority is this committee doing? Why are they doing it? And that's an important consideration. Next slide. Here's a case that I got to argue personally. My name is not on the case because I was substituting in for another attorney that filed the brief and did the arguments. But what had happened in this case is the mayor had called up all the other 4 individuals on the city council and was discussing the performance of the city manager. and basically found out that if somebody made a motion and somebody seconded that motion, they had enough votes to terminate the city manager. The presiding judge in that particular panel was Judge Richard Griffin. And Judge Griffin was the son of Senator Robert Griffin. Senator Griffin's job in the Senate at that time was the minority whip, which means he got to be the person to call up all the other senators in his delegation to find out how they were going to vote on something. So Richard Griffin really understood the role of that one-on-one communication. Oh, so we made it past that hurdle. However, my clients in that case then, a half hour before the regular city council meeting, all met in the manager's office and said, either resign or we're going to fire you at the regular meeting. And we lost the case on that basis because they had gone in together and issued this ultimatum to the city manager in a closed session that was never authorized. And there wasn't a single exception that would have saved them in that situation. So she ended up getting a sizable settlement. Next slide. So what is required under the Open Meetings Act? Well, first thing, you post your meeting schedule within 10 days after you set it. You can do it at the beginning of your fiscal year, at a calendar year. You have some options in that situation. But you have a schedule and you post it within 10 days. If you change that schedule for any reason, you find out, oh, we didn't realize that the 4th of July was on a Monday, so we're going to move that to Tuesday. You have to post the new notice and the new schedule within 3 days after you make the change. And it's the city council that determines it, or the board of review, or whichever board you're talking about. If you have a special meeting or rescheduled regular meeting, you require at least 18 hours notice. Again, speaking from a little personal experience, our firm had a case where the clerk typed up the notice, put it on her bulletin board behind her, and then at 5 o'clock shut the door, and nobody could see that notice. It wasn't in all the usual places. It was just in her office. Well, they tried to count from 5 o'clock until 8 in the morning as part of their 18 hours. The judge was having none of it and overturned everything they did. So, you got to follow these things. And again, courts count. I know how to count to 18. That judge will really remind you. And if your clients are sitting behind you, he's laughing at them. You need that 18 hours. So as much notice as you can give is probably the best. And then you need to keep minutes of all meetings. One of the things I noticed when I was running for office of mayor for the first time, I noticed that the mayor was not calling the meeting to order at the given time. So people would walk in 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes late, and he wouldn't have started the meeting. Well, that's 15 minutes of time or 20 minutes of time that's lost, and it's lost forever. You don't get that time back. Then we had a council member who loved to see his words in print, except for when he would see the exact words he said in print, he'd realize, oh, that makes me look like an idiot. And then he'd try to get council to change the minutes so that he would seem more of a reasonable person. That was crazy. So almost a half an hour of every meeting was wasted on those two things, not starting the meeting on time and, arguing over the minutes. When you have a set of minutes like we had, that's a court transcript. I'm an attorney. I love court transcripts because I can find all the little things in the transcript that, go unnoticed. But that's not what a set of minutes should be. Take a look at this. You need the date, the time, the place, members present, members absent, any decisions made, and the purposes of any closed session. So you've got to include that in your minutes as well. And any roll call vote that's taken. So that's another important thing with the Open Meetings Act. You've got to do these things for every meeting that you have. And again, that section of minutes is only this much. You know, you don't have to put down, Dave said this, Bob said this, Chris said that. That's not a real set of minutes.
So is it ever correct to change the minutes of a meeting when a person says, what I meant was this, even though I said that?
You could, but it just makes a person still look like they didn't know what they're doing.
So typically, in the various boards that we have, you know, we have the meeting, and then the next meeting, we were, you know, the minutes come out,
Right?
and someone may or may not say, this is what the minutes say, but what I really was trying to convey was something a little different. Is it correct to change the minutes on that kind of request?
You can't change history, but you can explain history, so you can add to it. You know, council member so-and-so made the statement that that's not what he meant something else. Yeah, you can include that in it. However, if you do the minutes like I'm talking about, you don't talk about, you know, Chris Johnson said this. You just, a discussion was held on the council about the police response to the parade kind of thing. And that's all you need to have in there. Motion by so-and-so, seconded by so-and-so to, you know, adopt the minutes with the additional comment. No problem.
Stating that basically all minutes need to have, other than minutes, absence, etc. Basically, it's just motions.
Yes, that's all you have to have.
Oh, yeah. So don't have to have Councilperson Smith said this, Councilman Jones said that. All that stuff can be left off the minutes.
Correct. And it really will smooth the amount of time that you're doing things. Yes.
Well, again, just to be clear, you said what's the basic requirements that must be, or we should present it, but it's not improper, it's not.
You can have a, yeah, you can do a court transcript.
Planning commission, we have a long discussion, make a motion, and then we'll go to the city council, and the council people may wonder the basis of the discussion and the thoughts. And one way to do that is the minutes. There's public who might not be at the meeting, it might be an ongoing issue, and they might like to look back and see in the minutes in some sense of the discussion.
Yeah, that's valuable too. But again, depending on, Bob and I were in a community about a year ago. And this particular, I think it was a historic district commission, right?
It was.
So the historic district commission spent 2.5 hours arguing about what was in the set of minutes and never even adopted them. Just because I didn't say that. Yes, you did. No, I didn't, you know, and that went on for 2.5 hours. So that's the kind of thing I'm trying to keep you from getting into.
What happens?
Then they're not adopted as minutes.
Is it legal then that you have?
No, you do need to vote one way or the other. You can substitute your own set of minutes as long as you make sure you have all those things in it. But as a practical matter, if you have voted to, I don't know, demolish a building, for example, you can't undo that if you've already let out a contract on it. So you can't change history by doing a set of minutes that way. Yes.
Council has recorded sessions that are publicly available in addition to minutes.
Yeah, in fact, this meeting is being recorded.
Which is all the commentary that someone might need. But boards and commissions generally aren't recorded. It just depends on the minutes. As a result, is there more need, perhaps appropriate in board?
In that situation, I'd agree, and especially your zoning board of appeals is something you want more commentary in there, specific findings of fact, you know, to rely on whether you granted or denied a variance that the person is asking for. So those ones would be much more detailed than the city council minutes. Next slide. Citizens have the right to address your meetings, and they can tape or video record it. That's right in the law. The governing body may establish reasonable rules on that. So, for example, you may want to put a rule that says, everybody talks for 3 minutes once. Or you can decide where in the agenda you're going to put public comment. Here's another interesting thing. A person can only be removed from a meeting by causing a breach of the peace at that meeting. So Chris Johnson comes into your meeting and I start raising holy heck, and you can't continue the meeting. You can ask the chief of police to escort me out the door. Then I show up to your next meeting. You know what's going to happen next. I'm going to do the same thing, but you got to wait till I start down that path again before you remove me from the meeting. There is not a single circuit court judge since 1977 who's upheld a request by a local body to get an injunction to keep Chris Johnson from coming to your meeting. It has to be done with a breach of the peace at that meeting. Next slide. So you can limit citizen comment to a specific portion of the meeting. It can be at the beginning, could be during, for example, at the agenda topic that you're handling. It could be at the end of the meeting. Some practical political advice here now. If you made all your decisions and now are letting the public talk about it now at the end of the meeting, you will have a very hostile public. And your chances of being reelected next time or reappointed go down significantly. Yes?
Can you add public comments into the agenda as you go, or does it all have to be within the agenda at the beginning?
No, it can be at the beginning or during the agenda topic.
Does it have to be on the agenda?
It has to be known as one of your rules that when we get to the topic of the police department, we'll have citizen comment on the police department. Right. But you can't remove it either. Yes.
Process has been for the last 10 years. If there is a motion and a second, city council discusses it. We go to the public and ask, is there any comment before the council votes on it?
That's an acceptable way to do it. And usually it gets more specific to the topic if you do it at that time rather than at the beginning, for example.
Question, anybody has this wishes to speak on a specific topic on our agenda, if they can wait, please wait until that item comes up.
Yeah, and sometimes, that's actually what we used to do in my community. Yes.
Don't have to have it on the agenda, so if you got a topic, and then you don't have to put public comment as part of the process. If it's part of your process, you can just.
If you adopt rules that say, we will discuss an agenda topic from the citizens at the time of the agenda, you can do that.
Somebody that's comes to city council to ask or talk to city council or state that is not on the agenda, that is something, is jumping off the break wall, which is not on the agenda, would you allow them to speak?
Again, at the beginning of the meeting or the end of the meeting. Yeah, yeah. It's always best to have at least one at the beginning, so if somebody has to leave, they've at least had a chance to say their piece. One interesting thing is you can't set a total limit on the time. And this is kind of leads to a lot of consternation. Remember, I told you about those 50 people that showed up at a meeting? If they all took 5 minutes that we were allowing people to talk, that could be hours of just public comment. So this is one of the techniques I used to use, and I think it was pretty valuable. You know, citizen one gets up and says A, B, C, and D. And citizen two gets up and says A, B, C, and D. And citizen three gets up and says A, B, C, and D. I'm sensing a pattern. You know, I'm actually actively listening. So what I would do is, it's Mr. Smith, citizen number three. And I'd say to Mr. Smith, so Mr. Smith, what you're telling the council is you want us to do A, B, C, and D. And Mr. Smith would go, yeah. And so I'd raise my hand. I said, who here thinks we should do what Mr. Smith wants, A, B, C, and D? Raise your hand. And, you know, 47 hands would go up. Now, I always said, be fair. So I'd always say, who does not want us to do what Mr. Smith said? Raise your hands, and we get one or two people to raise their hands on that. Now, they have all told the council what they are thinking, but they don't all have to go up to the podium and say A, B, C, and D, because most people anyway don't like public speaking. It's a scary thing. And especially when they've been saying the same thing over and over and over again, you know, even they will understand they're sounding like a broken record. But I've kind of short-circuited that process by letting them, you know, show the council by way of raising their hand what they think. And so we'd use only probably, you know, 15 minutes instead of 2.5 hours of doing that.
What if, in those 47 people who want A, B, C, D, some of them do want the opportunity?
And you let them speak. Yes,
So you can't substitute raising your hand for.
correct. Correct. If they want to speak, they have the opportunity to speak and follow your rules. You know, whether it be 5 minutes, 2 minutes, or whatever. Next slide, please. Now, to go into a,
Question for you, in that previous slide.
okay,
You can't set the time limit for the total amount of public comment.
correct.
Does that also apply to a scheduled public hearing? The public comment during a public hearing?
You can't set a time limit on that,
Okay,
total time limit. You can set individual limits. You know, you get to speak for 2 minutes. You get to speak for 5 minutes or whatever.
differentiating a public hearing from the public
No.
comment section.
No, the
Okay.
public hearing is the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back forward. Yeah.
Could you just clarify, so if you had a 3-minute rule for public comment, and it's a small meeting, sometimes, a mayor or chair might, at their discretion, let someone speak a little longer if they're interested. Which is a circumstance, there's just a couple public there, and which is maybe different than a meeting where there's 100 people, and you're letting someone speak a long time and someone else only speak 3 minutes, which could be perceived as bias. Is it okay in some circumstances for the chair to allow more than the 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
On occasion, I would look to the rest of the council without objection, you know, would you allow Mr. Smith to talk for a couple more minutes? And usually they'd say yes. Yeah, again, if there's 100 people, no, they wouldn't give me that permission.
What are your recommendations for the amount of time given to the public? We're at 5 minutes right now.
We had 5 minutes in my community and I thought that was way too long. If you can't say what you're going to say in 2 or 3 minutes, you know, then you're repeating yourself over and over again. So it's my recommendation. It's not a legal thing, but it's kind of experience.
Follow up. If the council sets 3 minutes, then all the boards and commissions should also adopt that same 3-minute structure.
It's recommended, but not required. You might, certain kinds of presentations might require more. Zoning Board of Appeals issues, for example, you know, are going to be very fact-specific, and maybe a, you know, community member that's next to the property that's asking for the variance has some very specific things they need to tell the board. So they may want to change that to 5 minutes or something. I don't recommend you go on 10 minutes like Robert's Rules of Order would give you, but so. Okay, there's basically 6 reasons to go into closed session for local governments. And just a majority vote is required for discipline, personnel evaluation of an official or an employee, and 2 for collective bargaining. Next slide. The other 4 basically require a 2/3 roll call vote to go into closed session. And you know, I always recommended to my clients, always do the roll call vote because it's muscle memory. You won't ever mess up if you're always doing it that way. So let's go into the 6 reasons you can go. And I'm doing these in order of the statute, not in order of importance. Next slide. If requested by the named person, there may be a closed session to discuss a dismissal, suspension, or disciplining of a public official or an employee. Kind of as a practice point, I always had my clients get it in writing because a judge would always, if I could have a piece of paper with somebody's signature on it, I won that point. But the person has to request it, not just you've decided you don't want to embarrass the person. That's not a sufficient reason. The person actually has to be the person asking for the closed session. Next reason. For strategy and negotiation sessions of a collective bargaining agreement, we're not talking about an individual contract now, we're talking about the collective bargaining agreement. And I always recommended to my clients doing it somewhere close in time to when you're going to start the negotiations. Because you can go into closed session to strategize, you know, we only have this much money, or we need to change this in the contract, that sort of thing. So have it close in time to when you're starting the negotiations, because if you're 4 years away from that new collective bargaining agreement, chances are circuit court judge isn't going to buy it. Next slide. To consider the purchase or lease of real estate. Now, this is a real issue because rightly or wrongly, and I think mostly wrongly, people who think you have more money than anybody else. You're a government, you print money. I got a significantly higher expectation of getting my property sold to a government than just Joe Average out on the street. So keeping those things tight to the vest is really important until you get an option or an actual purchase agreement ready. But please note the sale of city property is not covered under this. So everything involving the sale of any city property has to be done in no open session. Next one. To consult with your attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in a case of specific pending litigation. Smith versus Petoskey. You know, there's an actual case going on, and you're getting the inside scoop from your attorney that's representing you in that action. And we're not talking about the guy in the back that goes, I'm going to sue you guys. That's not an actual pending case. What an actual pending case is that, you know, Smith versus Petoskey case. And discussing those things in public is clearly going to have a detrimental effect on things in the lawsuit. I once had a city council that wouldn't agree to go into closed session when I was talking about an excessive force case on a citizen. And I had to tell the city council, I'm not going to do this in an open session, because when I tell you what I really think about this case, you know, the price of, you know, the settlement will double, triple, maybe even quadruple. Next. To consider the contents of an application for employment. And this mostly comes up in the context of the city council doing a search for a new manager or a city attorney or something along that line. If the candidate requests confidentiality, reviewing the contents of that application can be done in a closed session. However, if the council is going to interview potential city attorney candidates, then they have to do that in an open meeting, and then the application becomes public. Next situation. Any information that's subject by state or federal statute to be exempt under FOIA. Again, we can use the situation of what is the protocol for responding to an active shooter at the high school. The bad guys want to know that. They want to know what's in that. An appraisal during the period is subject to a FOIA exception. And you can go into closed session to discuss that appraisal. Security plans, what do you do for the water system? How are you going to defend that? Because the bad guys would like to know that information before it happens. Next section. So the Open Meetings Act requires a separate set of minutes for the closed session. Again, you know how I recommend it be not a particularly long set of minutes. The clerk takes the minutes, and they can only be discussed if required by a court order. They only get produced when the judge says, turn those minutes over, and that's it. If the person requesting a closed session for an evaluation, for example, during that meeting says, hey, this isn't going the way I thought. I want this to be public. Stop the closed session and go out and finish it up in an open session. Next slide, please. Now, if you got that court transcript style set of minutes, you can go into closed session to argue about, I said this, no, you didn't, yes, you did, no, I didn't. And you can do that in a closed session. And the minutes of the closed session should be destroyed 1 year and 1 day after they've been adopted by the public body. You shouldn't keep documents around that, might hang you up one day. Next slide. What happens in a closed session should stay in closed session. There's actually an attorney general's opinion that reviewed a situation of disclosing the minutes of a closed session. And in that situation, the AG ruled that, could lead to civil and criminal penalties for the person that did that. Now, the attorney general in that situation only reviewed the disclosure of the minutes, but most municipal attorneys would argue that it goes for any information you learned in that closed session. And it used to frustrate my wife like crazy when I come home from a closed session. What do you do? Can't tell you. She was a lawyer anyway. She knew I couldn't say anything, but you always try. So most, again, municipal attorneys, and think about it. You have a friend that owns that property at Main Street and Elm Street, and you let them know that, we're thinking of putting the new city hall there. Well, guess what? That property doubled in his mind, and it means you're starting from a whole different place than what a fair evaluation would be. Next slide. By the way, it could also be a violation of your ethics ordinance if you have one, or council rules of conduct if you've adopted those. Could be in a charter provision. Definitely a violation of Robert's Rules of Order, and could be a violation of the State Ethics Act. So, just keep what happened in the closed session to yourself. That's the place that it was meant to be. Next slide, please. So, here's the technology issue again. Next slide. This is one of my favorites. I mentioned before, the legislature really hasn't taken a look at the Open Meetings Act or the Freedom of Information Act, except in one instance that we'll get to in a moment. So on the right-hand side, those are state legislators. They've seen this terrible accident and they still haven't done anything about it. Technology's advanced. We have all sorts of new things going, and they've just allowed the courts to decide what's going to happen. Next slide. And then we have the technology trap. It's so easy to get on your computer or your smartphone. Next slide. Next slide. So, as I mentioned before, you can do deliberations electronically. Let me give you an example. A city council member comes up with a great idea. and the council member shares this idea with the council, all the other members of the council by way of an email. That is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. But we've been trained in business to hit reply all, so that everybody gets a benefit of what we're doing. See the problem? Next slide, please. Social media can also be in this category.
I'm sorry. You said, the example of a city council person comes up with a great idea, sends it out to an email to the rest of the council.
Correct.
That's okay.
That's okay. You're not deliberating on anything. This is my great idea.
But, so then, if you're the, one of the people in the board, should you respond to that?
No.
And that's what you're saying, don't respond to that.
Yeah, don't hit reply all. Thou shalt not hit reply all. If you remember one thing from tonight.
That could be for anybody, I suppose, any commission.
Right, any board, any commission, the council, any of those. And then you have,
Can I take that one step further? If you don't want to hit reply all, but can, to this gentleman's point, can that first council member reply to only the person who sent that email to him, I mean, to the group, without hitting reply all?
that's why I said get on the phone and have a conversation, because we know that that's acceptable under the St. Aubin case. People forget that this was originally designed so that people would talk to each other, you know? Even though it's in my hand, I can talk to you.
Sounds like a slippery slope.
It is. I wouldn't recommend even sending out the first email. I'd bring it up at a city council meeting. You know, I got this great new idea about, you know, putting benches in the park.
The next person send their own private email to the whole council that says, I think we should have gold-plated benches in the park. Joe Smith up here, George up here said we should put benches in the park. That's his idea. He sent it to everybody. Can I come up with an idea and send an email out to everybody that says, I believe we should have gold-plated so they stand out more?
No, you don't want to respond to that initial email. Yeah, that's when you're deliberating. The first one isn't a violation of the Open Meetings Act per se, but it's still not a good idea to do it, okay? Don't do that, because I always put it in almost religious terms, avoid the near occasion of sin. You know, it just, you don't want to start down that path at all. So council member 1 takes to her Facebook page and she's championing a new great idea, assuming that it relates to the city. Council member 2 does not like this great idea and posts on that social media page themselves. A couple days later, council member 3 agrees with council member 1 and posts a reply. You see the problem? You're deliberating. You're doing something related to public policy, although this might be a little bit more open than on an email. Here's the problem, next page. None of the procedural requirements of the Open Meeting Act are required or done in either the email or the social media situation. Nobody's posted a meeting. Nobody's allowed public comment. Nobody's taking minutes. It's just being all done under subterfuge. And literally, communities have gotten into significant trouble for this. Next slide. So what happens when you do violate the Open Meetings Act? Well, anybody can come in and file an action to invalidate your actions. And that includes even members of the media who have a little bit more money than Joe average citizen. The AG can come in, or the county prosecutor can come in, you know, to invalidate your actions. Next slide. Again, we have that AG's opinion that talks about disseminating closed session minutes. So that might be a problem for the individual releasing them. Next slide. Here's where it gets to be a little less fun. The Open Meetings Act has criminal penalties in it for intentionally violating the Open Meetings Act. 90 days in jail and $1,000 a first offense, or 1 year and $2,000 for subsequent offenses. Now, you folks didn't run for office or accept appointment to a public board to go to jail because you violated the Open Meetings Act. You had better purposes to run than that. So it's important that you understand I give very conservative advice when I'm talking to another city attorney about what's going on in the community, because criminal penalties are totally different than getting fined. The Open or the Freedom of Information Act has huge financial penalties attached to them, but you're not paying it out of your own pocket. But the individual that's violating the Open Meetings Act might go to jail. Next slide, please. And now we, for the first time, have an attorney general that says, if you give me a concrete example of somebody violating the Open Meetings Act, my office is going to go get them. And that's the first time since 1977 that we've had an attorney general say that out loud. Next slide. I said that the Open Meetings Act had one situation where the legislature did act, and that was during the COVID-19 crisis. And Governor Whitmer had issued stay-at-home orders and also allowed virtual meetings to take place. Next slide. Some people didn't like the way she had handled that, so they filed a lawsuit, and the Michigan Supreme Court issued a couple of very important rulings on that. There were two acts that she was following. The Emergency Powers of the Governors Act was adopted in 1946, and the 1976 Emergency Management Act that was in place. And she was issuing these orders under both of them. Next slide. Well, the court ruled that the 1976 Act required the legislature to approve any emergency beyond 28 days. And the court said, yep, that's required. It's not, at the whim of the governor. The other item was that they ruled the whole Emergency Powers of the Governor Act unconstitutional because it basically gave all the legislative power to the executive, and they just found it unconstitutional. Next slide. So as a result of that court order, the state legislature and the governor came in and signed Public Act 228 of 2020. And that actually allowed for virtual meetings to take place. But that authority expired completely in December of 2021. And the legislature is still reluctant to allow virtual meetings to take place. Again, in my community, we found that it actually increased public participation because they didn't have to get all dressed up and go down to City Hall on a snowy, cold night. They could just Zoom in and get it that way. So we found it increased participation. I don't know what your situation was here.
Yeah, same.
But apparently the legislature wants you to be yelled at in person. So you have to go down and, get yelled at in person. You have to do the meeting together in the same room. And various legislators or council members, unless they're members of a deployed unit of the Army, Navy, or Armed Forces, they're the only ones that can attend virtually and count toward a quorum and have their vote counted. Next slide. So this is my first rule of public service. It's just not fun or worth it to be sitting in jail.
So in the state of Michigan, have there been situations where people been jailed for this kind of thing?
I am not aware of any, but then again, we didn't have an attorney general that's promised to clean all this stuff up. I do know of situations though where the court made really interesting examples out of them where they would have to go to every city and village in the county and explain what they did wrong and why they did it wrong. And you know, it was kind of a humiliating experience for them. Yes.
Where he was referred for a violation and they outsourced it to a different prosecutor. And it was dismissed because they couldn't establish that the conduct was intentional. And sorry, that's kind of a more of a statement because I can't remember where it was, and it was just recently.
I'm not familiar with that case, but another interesting thing about FOIA, while I still have you, council members that text during meetings, those are often discoverable under FOIA as well. And there's a certain community down by where I work, and council members were texting each other, and somebody in the audience brought a FOIA request. That circuit court judge said, yeah, those texts are available. Well, you know what they were texting about? The person's appearance that would be making the comment. That guy is 380 pounds. Ah, look at how ugly she is. Ah, you know, and this was going on constantly. Guess what happened to those council members after those texts were released? Nobody ever got reelected again. So really be careful about what you put into a text, an email, or whatever. And with that, do you want to take a quick break?
Yes, please. Yep. 5 minutes.
Okay, time for break. Time for break. Good. But not long,
5 minutes.
5 minutes, right. I have a question for you. Who's the vote for the slide? You or Shane or both of you?
We both are. James doing that one, I'm doing the two.
This is not gonna work for the class. That's the way they are. I have a lot of transition. I need to know where to point that point.
Yeah, you absolutely.
So they
can.
recorded this.
I don't know why. Let me get yours.
Yeah.
I don't see any problem with it. It's optional for the council. They don't have one. But if they do get it, you got it. Our community used to accept those comments until the Gaza war. And then until the Gaza happened. And those came in line, city council, you know, trying to resolution. So obviously, what's the city? We don't have a dog in that hunt.
So, if you, so. Wrap, right? So that's where that. Yes. Great. So when you do it to the wall, it's going to.
No, and great, also, absolutely, like the.
Just got-
48 hours, yeah.
If I get an unobstructed, yeah,
Well, she's related.
okay.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
So as long as you know that, the only time that I don't swear is, let's say, for instance, if someone tries to join the meeting remotely, I have to let them in. So like, the computer that's back in the rack, this is the wireless keyboard I have. So if someone were to like join this meeting, I have to admit the participant in. So then it's like, this is taking us for like this. But it's temporary, as soon as I hit like a mouse once, then it goes back to. Yeah, that's fine, yeah, absolutely, it's just it might just be a tiny delay. But otherwise Shane. Yeah, that's what Shane's doing, is keeping up.
I got you. Yeah.
I know, I'm trying.
Making your life as difficult as possible.
So, I'm gonna X out for a second, Because this was just on the screen, I didn't share the screen yet, so it'll get back to you, just for a second, I gotta do this. And.
Interesting.
Minimize.
Yeah, that's what I said. There we go. Is that your second slide?
Yeah. That's about the third slide.
Oh, for some reason it.
Okay, so we're sharing our screens, it's good for this, so.
So when I advance, you're gonna need to try to keep up, right?
Yep.
Because in mine just doesn't go from one slide, I've got transitions to all slides, that's why it's gonna be more important. It wouldn't work very well if I said next.
Yeah, no problem.
Like we install it. in a-
No, ma'am.
That's.
Oh, shit.
Okay, try it now. No?
Yeah, I went back. And let's see if I can go forward. I can go forward. Yeah, this is good. If it does like this, I think.
We may just want, Bob,
Oh, yeah.
may want to just do what I did. Yeah. Oh, I know, you know, this isn't looking at it.
And it goes underneath the person along.
You know, they get with the trench.
This one of the ways. Open it, the side, so he's very. And that's where.
So you think if there's a failure there, it's.
He told me. The stairs are on board.
You see, he's changing these slides and she's changing.
Yeah. Well.
And he said, groundwater. He was very. Oh, yeah.
So get rid of these. What are they?
One place. These dudes have.
There's that.
Friday morning. It was the time. Oh, yeah. All right. And you get a second.
I can still right now. I know, I do not.
Here's your shirt. Yes. I said, really?
That's fine.
So you're gonna stick by it, and I choose.
Got a calendar. My grandparents.
Well.
That's great.
It's always good to have it.
Just farming to get away from happy crowds.
Yeah, I'll bring that in.
Good, how are you? We're gonna go ahead and get started so we can get you out of here in time. Wonder if he should have.
Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, time has a way of really flying, doesn't it? Whether you're having fun or not. So you might as well have fun.
Doesn't work.
Okay. We're gonna try this remote thing again one more time here and see if it works. Right now we got. Yeah, we've got
Two different things going on.
two high-powered, very underpaid public servants here trying to work two different computer systems and keeping them in sync. All right, we're gonna go back one slide. Oh, I'll try it too. There, back one slide. Who's controlling these? Me?
You.
Oh, there we go. We'll try that.
You have that.
You just gave him my mouth.
Oh, well, let's try the mouse. If I say go for, okay. All right, I'm gonna try the mouse if it doesn't. Okay?
Yeah, hold on one second, though, let me just get it to full.
Ignore the woman behind the curtain. Well, just for now, don't ignore her tomorrow or anything like that. All right?
So you ready to go to the next?
Well,
one?
not yet.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Either I'll tell you or I'll try that. You see, my slides are a little bit different than Chris's. Chris is very straightforward and nice, and I couldn't do that. Mine has a lot of these transitions and things in it that if I had to say next, they'd get tired of hearing from me and I'd get tired of saying it. So we'll try this. All right. Shane said we're going to do our own introductions because I told Shane that. My name's Bob Slattery. I've been with the Michigan Municipal League for a long time, 30 years probably, kind of as just a member, not an employee. But I was elected president of the league on September 11th, 2001. I was elected president of the league at a conference, a convention in Battle Creek that was like no other, but that day was like no other. But so I was president of the league. I was mayor of my hometown, not as long as Chris was mayor of his, but for 19 years I was mayor. I was chairman of the planning commission for a little while. I've given this I'm kind of a Robert's Rules geek, I guess. I've loved Robert's Rules, and I've given this presentation to school boards and school district boards and lots of communities around the state now with the Michigan Municipal League, and they've let me be their parliamentarian now. So I get to keep doing this. And I'm a registered parliamentarian. And since I'm a member of past president of the league, I get to keep coming back. So I love it. So tonight we're going to talk about how to have more effective, in fact, I hope more meaningful meetings using some form of order, Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedure before it was even Robert's Rules. I've been to a lot of meetings and I found that the ones that are most effective, the best use of my time are the ones that had some structure to them, where we had a presiding officer that kind of controlled the meeting and kept the discussion going forward and kept things moving. And that's hopefully some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. So let's see how this works. If I do this.
Very first time, so hold on. Then from here, it should be you.
Okay, so these are what we're going to talk about. Parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules are not exactly the same thing. We're going to talk about how one became the other. We'll talk about a funnel of laws that we all operate under as municipal employees, as governments. We'll talk some about your agendas and minutes in general, but you're using those from the city of Petoskey as a good example. And then some decorum, civility, and rules of debate. And there are rules for debate, according to Roberts. It's not just a bunch of people sitting around at the coffee shop, talking. There's rules. And the more we can kind of sort of discipline ourselves to follow those rules, the shorter our meetings will be, the more effective they'll be. And I'm going to take a couple of things, make assumptions. Meetings are not your favorite thing to do. You know, to come to a meeting on a Monday night is not your most favorite thing. You want to get in, make some decisions, be effective, and go home. That's just my assumption. All right, so we're going to talk about motions, which is where all the action happens, and how various ways of taking votes. Look at that, it worked. Okay, so what is parliamentary procedure? It's not just, you know, maybe, is this the PDF version that we're looking at here?
Yeah.
Oh, well then all my other
That's all I got from
Okay.
Agnes.
Oh, really? Okay, well, okay, we'll make do. There's a lot of transitions and things that I just mentioned before that aren't gonna happen. You're just seeing the end slide, like this one. It was very dramatic, the way this went through this whole thing and got to this point. But, okay, so parliamentary procedure is things that rules that apply to not all groups, but groups that are deliberative assemblies, decision-making bodies that are relatively autonomous, free to make decisions for themselves, and members have fundamental rights that they can't, that can't be taken away from them except by punitive action because they did something wrong. That's rights to be present, which means the right to know about the meeting, right of notice, or the rights to make motion, the right to debate, and the rights to vote. You can't take those away from any members. Oh, and also, you can't kick a member out just because he doesn't agree with the rest of the group. And all of this is based on something called common parliamentary law. And it's stuff that we do, you do, we all, some of these things we do just out of courtesy, like only one person speaks at a time. Your charter, City of Petoskey Charter, section 4.5 says that a quorum is 3 members of the council. And you can't do anything except really vote to adjourn or when to call your next meeting, or maybe you can vote to recess to drag those guys out of the hallway and get your quorum back. But you can't do much without a quorum. Circling around, one person speaks at a time. Boy, that's so important. If we could get councils to speak and the chair or the mayor in this case to be assertive enough and to say, no, it's your turn to speak. And then it's your turn. And then you get recognized speakers. As Chris mentioned, it's the chair's responsibility to do that. Okay, decisions are made by members who are present. There's no provision for proxy voting or call-in voting or mail-in voting. You can't email your vote in. You only get one vote, even though you might be mayor pro tem and you're also chairman of the recreation committee. You still only get one vote. The rights of the minority are protected because by requiring a vote of the majority, sometimes a 2/3 vote of the majority, and the minority gets a chance to speak to get other people to come to their side and be part of the majority. Ultimately, the majority rules, but even then, once the majority has made a ruling on something, and we'll show you an example, the group can override once the chair has made a ruling on something, the group can override a ruling of the chair. Point being, it's the group that is ultimately the paramount factor. All right, let's try. Oh, here we go. Okay, so why use parliamentary procedure? Well, these reasons. It provides a recognizable format. If you belong to the city council and you're also on the planning commission, maybe board of review, you have a homeowners group, maybe you have a book club, whatever, and you had to learn a whole different set of rules for every meeting, every type of meeting, you'd go crazy. Also, when you have a recognizable format, people who come to your meeting, your public, know what to expect. They know that you're going to be following rules and things are going to be pretty much the same as the last meeting. You're not making stuff up. So that helps to maintain order. Also, when only one person is speaking at a time, if you can abide by that one rule, that will really shorten your meetings. Just one person speaking at a time. And everybody gets to speak, and everybody gets to speak the same amount of time, as Chris alluded to. providing for equality. And you should make, all the action, all the decisions are made via motions. We're not just sitting around debating something and talking about something and say, oh yeah, okay, that's a good idea, let's do that. No, somebody makes a motion, somebody seconds that motion, it gets voted on, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say nay, and you make a decision. This helps to move things along, expedite your, oh, and minutes that record action. And Chris really went into this a lot, and it's very, very important. I know your rules of procedure, which by the way, were last adopted or amended in 2012. So maybe it's time to look at them again, but it says in there that, where was I going with that? Oh, what should be in your minutes? And it says in there that the minutes can contain summaries of comments. I'm going to suggest to you, especially for city council meetings, you keep those comments very, very, very brief and don't try to paint the whole discussion of what led up to the vote on an issue. Just say a motion was made. You don't even have to say who was seconded according to Robert's rules, but a motion was made and the vote was, you know, 3 ayes, 3 yeses and 2 nays or something, and the vote carried. And this is what we'll do as a result. Keep them very, very brief. Now, if you want to, you can keep a separate document called a summary of the meeting and have all that discussion in it. But just keep that in the file, and at the meeting come, and here are the minutes that we recorded from the last meeting, and it's motions and actions, and because that's what should be in your minutes. Yes, now I understand Chris's point. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting myself. Chris's point about planning commissions, board of review, you need that documentation for substantive legal reasons, you know, to approve or disapprove. Not disapprove, but approve or deny a request. But yes.
Here's kind of a general question, and there's a theory that we say government should happen in front of the public, in front of people,
That's a law.
the law, all right. So oftentimes, council members, and I have been on council before, although not now, know how they're going to vote before they get to the meeting. They have talked to other members before they get to the meeting. Decisions have been made. You just said, and you want to get this meeting going, and you want to make the motion, and you want to get it done, and you don't want to include any text that's not necessary
In your minutes.
in the minutes. I just wonder sometimes how the public is really served.
Well, you're here to make decisions for the public and to take action and to build things or not build things or to. Yeah,
Decided, and the game is kind of cooked.
it shouldn't be.
Should,
It shouldn't be. I mean, if those council members are meeting before the meeting at the coffee shop and discussing how things are gonna go, and then maybe talking to other council members and this is how we're gonna vote. Don't do that. That's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Well, as individuals, we all pretty much, a lot of times, made up our minds before we come to a council meeting. Because you've got your packet at least 3, 4, 5 days ahead of time, and you've read all the information, and you should pretty much know, but you still have to have to take action. Somebody makes a motion, we buy a red fire truck. Somebody seconds it. Then you debate it back and forth. No, I think we shouldn't do that. We can't afford it. Yes, we can. We need to have it. It goes back and forth. And finally, the mayor, presiding officer says, are you ready for the question on whether we should buy a red fire truck? Yep, we're all ready. All those say aye, all those opposed say nay, and you make the decision in the council meeting after debate has taken place in the council meeting.
perceptions in the meeting.
You should be. Absolutely, absolutely should be. Because, but don't be, you shouldn't be meeting outside the meeting and making decisions outside the meeting, or even debating, deliberating is a term. Don't be deliberating outside. All that needs to be done, and it's not a theory, it's law. You know, that's the law, the Open Meetings Act, and you can go to jail for violating. You don't want to do that. Nobody wants to go to jail. I don't think. Yes.
Guys, a public communication tool And I think there's a place between the bare bones that Chris said need to be in there and 3 hours of deliberation from the Historical Society about the content. I don't think they need to be war and peace, but I do think that some degree of communication with the public is important. I personally think we strike a good balance here.
Okay.
Just put that into the papers for consideration.
No, I understand. I've read your minutes and your minutes are a little more inclusive or have more verbiage in them than Robert would like, and that I would like. But here's the thing, the more you put in those comments, the more ammunition you're giving the media, the public, anybody to take pot shots at them, all right? Minutes should be, there was a discussion, a motion was made to buy a red fire truck. After discussion and debate, the vote was this and vote was that. Now, as I said, if you want all that text, and I understand the reason for that, I was mayor for 19 years and my minutes were longer than, not my minutes, but the city's at the time was a little longer than I wanted them to be. If you want all that stuff, how about considering this? Draft all that stuff and put it in another document called summary of the meeting. And then the minutes that you approve at the next meeting will be, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened.
That's video.
And you have the video. But you know, my last job, I was Public Works Director, City of Burton. And I had to go to all the city council. I got to go to all the city council meetings. Yeah. Are you watching this, Mayor? And the city council in Burton insisted on transcribed, not summaries of, but they wanted, Councilmember Smith said this and this and this, Councilmember Jones said this and this and this, and they were live streaming and recording their minutes as well. So they were live streaming, they insisted on transcript, and then get the poor clerk. The poor clerk would get in trouble at the next meeting because she wouldn't have the minutes ready. Well, it was a 4-hour meeting that she's trying to get every single word down, you know? Frankly, I think now they probably have software that you can feed all that in and it'll just do it for you, but what's the value of that? Anyway, yes.
Called the meeting of the whole, which precedes the actual monthly meeting.
Yes.
And that is where they discuss and kind of deliberate in a public forum,
Yeah.
the topics that they will be voting on come that next public meeting. So in the absence of that in city government, you have no way of deliberating other than one-on-one conversations.
No, city councils can have meetings of committee of the whole as well, and they can meet ahead of time as long as it's correct me if I'm wrong, but as long as it's a published meeting and you know you're starting at 5:30, not at 6 o'clock when the regular council meeting starts, you can have committee members meetings of the whole council. And the value of that is those rules are a little bit different for committees of the whole. People can debate back and forth. There's no limit to the amount of time they can go back and forth. You don't have to stand to make a motion. And there's different little things according to Roberts anyway. So there's value to that. But the key word you used is public. Those meetings are public. And city councils can do the same thing. And Burton does that a lot. They have committees of the whole and they meet before the meeting and hash things up. They deliberate, but they don't vote. Okay. All right, moving right along. Yes, moving right along. Yes, sir.
Do we approve these secondary, you talked of a motion for minutes. And you said, well, you could also do a scribing of the discussion. Does that also get voted on?
No, that would just be that'd be the background information of what happened at the meeting. What you're gonna vote on is your minutes.
So
The actions that you took.
but then that leads council into debating what is in this document that's going to be.
Yeah, I understand. It'd be a difficult thing. The easiest thing, keep your minutes very, 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 very brief, you know. That's the easiest, best answer to that. Like Chris and I, we told you, they met for 2.5 hours trying to approve last month's meeting minutes because it was he said this and she said that, and don't do that. So where does all this come from? A lot of it goes back to, not a lot of it, some of it goes way back to ancient Greeks, but most of it's derived from hundreds of years of practice from the English Parliament, hence the name parliamentary procedure. And when it came over to this country, there was lots of different flavors of it because the colonies that came over here were chartered, a lot of them, and they had different understanding of what the rules were. But still, up and down the seaboard, all these colonies use these rules somehow to draft the Declaration of Independence, wage war, a constitution, and start setting up states on rules that they stole, brought from Parliament, which I think is very cool. But it was very confusing. Nobody had a good understanding of what the rules really were. And then until along comes Robert. Henry Martin Robert. He was a soldier, and in 1863, when he looked like that, he retired as a brigadier general. I don't think I can show you his picture there. But when he was a major, he was asked to facilitate a church meeting. It had to do with defense of that area. This is during 1863. What was going on in 1863? Civil War. Right. And anyway, he didn't want to do it. He did not want to do it. He didn't want to embarrass himself. He didn't want to do a disservice to the group. But he's a good soldier. You don't retire as a brigadier general without doing things when you look like this that you are uncomfortable doing. So he did it. And history doesn't say much about what happened at that meeting, but it says it lasted 14 hours and it was tumultuous. And Robert came out of there shaken and said he would not even go to another meeting, let alone lead one until he learned something about procedure. So he started putting together these little slips of paper that he carried with him about this is what the procedure should be. Oh, because all those great parliamentary procedures that allowed us to set up the colonies and the states and all that, they didn't work for little groups like us, for municipal groups, for homeowners association, for church groups. There are different rules for legislative bodies than we have here, a little bit different. So he started putting them together, and he looked around, and there were already some rules out there. Thomas Jefferson, when he was vice president and you're president of the Senate, he put together a book for the Senate, and then a guy named Cushing put one together for the House, because those two bodies are significantly different enough to need their own sets of rules. So he started looking around, and in 1876 published his little compendium that he thought was going to be 16 pages, turned out to be 166 pages. And he wanted to call it Pocket Manual of Rules of Order of Deliberative Assemblies. But the publisher was a wise man and said, let's just call it Robert's Rules. And he did. And now it's in his 12th edition, looks like that. It's still put out by Robert's grandson and the people that worked on even the first edition. And when you adopt Robert's Rules, this is what you adopt. 732 pages worth. It's way more than you, and it looks like this. Brought a copy in case anybody wanted to peruse it during Chris's presentation, but I forgot it. It's 732 pages, but it's way more than you or I need to know to run a city council meeting or to participate in the planning commission meeting. So, because it has all stuff about conventions and how to draft bylaws and how to punish people that mess up. And so now there's at least these, Jefferson's, Cushing's, Roberts, and the legislatures still don't use Roberts, they use Mason's. Michigan State Legislature and every other state legislature, House and Senate in the country, except for, I can't remember what those four are, use Mason's manual. City of Lansing uses Mason's manual. They don't use Robert's Rules. So anyway, there's got this four. Then here's my favorite, Robert's Rules for Dummies. And I've got that here. And I would hasten to say that this is not a parliamentary authority on par with Robert's Rules, but it's a great place to start learning about parliamentary procedure. And I would recommend it because one, it's available in an audio version. So you can listen to it while you're doing doing your run, making your run, or working in the yard or working around the house. And it's also electronic version, and you can get it in paperback, hardback, everything. It's a great little, if you know the Dummies series, they're easy to read, and if you're not put off by the Dummies title, it's a great place to start. But here's a book I would recommend to you. That's this little book. It's Robert's Rules of Order newly revised in brief. It's written by the same people and it goes right along with the big document. It cross-references in here. And this is everything you need to know for a city council meeting or a meeting of the planning commission or whatever. I recommend that the chair of all your groups have something like that to look at in a meeting. Oh, the advantage of this big book is it's very well, the electronic version, you can look up anything. Quorum, it'll give you 300 references about in here, what is a quorum and how you use that. Any term you can think of, you can look it up electronically. So it's very handy to do that. All right, take a break. Funnel of laws. I mentioned we were going to talk about a funnel of laws. Well, this is hard to do when it's like that. But anyway, we all operate under this funnel of laws when we're a municipality, starting with the state or federal and state laws. The federal constitution, especially Article 10, which is the one that says that anything that's not reserved to the Constitution is given to the states and to the people, Article 10. And then Article 7 of the Michigan Constitution that gives you the authority to adopt a charter and to adopt resolutions. That's where your authority to have your local laws comes from. Your charter was adopted August 7th, 1984, took effect January 1st, 1985. And in that charter, section 4.1 says you shall draft your own rules and, says that you shall adopt ordinances and resolutions. Also in there, it gives you the authority to draft local rules of procedure, your own council rules of procedure. Those are the ones that I'm sure you're going to be getting on right away to re-amend it. But there's a lot of good things in your rules of procedure. Every council member should have those and they should know what's in them. It sets up all the different types of meetings, special meetings, regular meetings, special meetings, closed meetings, joint meetings with other bodies. It lays out what is your agenda, well, how what should be in your minutes. You got to know that council rules of procedure. Then below those are standing rules, and that might be, you meet at 2 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever time it is. Or it might be something like you have to sign in when you come to a council meeting and you want to contribute public comment. Standing rules. Below all that is Robert's Rules of Order. And if you adopt Robert's Rules of Order, it will help structure your meetings, but everything above it takes precedent. Especially this one, local rules of procedure. What a lot of communities do is they adopt Roberts, and then they have their own rules of procedure which supersede Roberts. And one perfect example is that 10-minute speech limit. Robert says everybody can speak twice for 10 minutes each on every motion that comes before you. That's what Robert says. Most councils make it 3. You have 5, I think, in your rules of procedure. Okay, and then below that is custom. And below that, now we're out of sync. I did that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did that. And below that is custom. And that might be, Sarah brings donuts or pizza to every council meeting, that's just, it's a custom. But there are other more serious customs, and custom is just as valid as any written law until somebody points out that, well, wait a minute, there's something up here in Roberts that says we don't do it that way. For example, maybe you have a custom that all of your election of officers are done by acclamation if there's only one candidate for a seat on council or a seat on a commission. But Robert says, or your rules say, they all have to be by ballot. Well, as soon as somebody points out they have to be by ballot, well, then your custom has to go away and you have to do them all by ballot.
Is the Pledge of Allegiance a custom, or is that part of Roberts?
That's a good question. Roberts does not specify what do they call it? A ceremony, beginning ceremony. He doesn't. In fact, call to order isn't necessarily a part of Roberts either. But the Pledge of Allegiance, some groups do an invocation, some do a special presentation of some sort. Those are custom. Or once you make them, here, let's go to the next slide here. This was working so well. Okay, Roberts, all that stuff in Roberts, their standard, his standard order of business really boils down to approving the minutes, doing reports, unfinished business, and by the way, there's no such thing as old business. If you have old business on your agenda or in your minutes, you should really change that to unfinished, because why? Because old business implies just stuff you talked about once and we're gonna bring it back up, like that camping trip you want to send the council on, or, I don't know, you want to build a statue to the parliamentarian or whatever, and we talked about it 3 months ago, let's talk about it again. No. Unfinished business is specifically things that were on the agenda last meeting that you didn't get to, or even more, things that were on the on the agenda last meeting that you were voting on when you all of a sudden had to adjourn for some reason. There was some emergency or something. So unfinished business is very specifically stuff from the last meeting. Old business can be anything. So anyway, we're out of sync again.
Yeah, I think you went
The,
one too far.
I went too far.
No meeting, go
Oh,
forward.
okay. Your agenda is great. I like your agenda. I would add to your agenda a line item that says adopt the agenda. Because until you've adopted the agenda, it's just a suggestion. And once you adopt the agenda, then it takes a 2/3 vote to add something to it. And this got to somebody's question earlier. Can you add things on the fly? No, once you adopt the agenda, it takes a 2/3 vote of the body to add or subtract to it later. Okay, so I would add adopt agenda. Also unfinished business down here somewhere. But you apparently get unfinished business accomplished somehow without calling it unfinished business. So the things about agendas is whatever works for you is perfectly fine as long as you adopt it. Okay, yes. Right at the top, right after. Yeah, sometimes, well, you call to order the Pledge of Allegiance or ceremony or whatever, and then right at the top. You should have it very close to the top after your roll call. Yeah. Because everything else is part of the agenda. You know? Okay, and agendas come in all styles and flavors. Oh, I'm doing those. I thought I was doing this one.
I'm
Okay.
doing that one.
No wonder I'm ahead. Pardon me, I'm from out of town. I didn't know. Okay, agendas come in all flavors. Look at this one from Franklin Downtown Partnership. They actually say what time things are gonna happen. I would not suggest you do that. That's crazy. And the reason I like the one, because as soon as you get off those schedules, somebody's not gonna be happy. They're gonna come in expecting you at 8:45 to talk about sunset and you've already done it. Or you're not gonna get it till 10:30, you know, and they're not gonna be happy. I like Mount Pleasant, and well, it doesn't show it there, but I like Mount Pleasant because at the bottom, it has a little blurb about this is what you do in public comment. It's got the rules for public comment here. The one behind that, which is from Romulus, has the whole back page. On the back of every agenda, they put out what are the rules for public comment. You know, you get 3 minutes, you can't be abusive, you can't use foul language, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You have to state your name, whatever your rules are. Okay. And you put them on the back of every agenda so that when people come in, everybody that gets an agenda knows what the rules are. All right, so if you have times on there, which I don't suggest, be guided by the times. But if you have a public hearing that's required and you said it's going to be at 7:30 on Monday night, it has to be at 7:30 on Monday night if it's a legally required public hearing. All right, anybody can make changes to the agenda, and I like the way your rules of procedure lays that out. But I forget how it's worded in there. But the thing about it is that once you adopt it, it takes a 2/3 vote to change that agenda. Okay, but I do suggest you adopted the agenda. Okay, I had 5 pages or 4 pages or something of one of your minutes, and I'm just going to use a point there that unfinished business should be in here somewhere, wherever you put it on the agenda. And lastly, a lot of that verbiage, if it works for you, it works for you, and I'm not here to tell you to do it differently, all right? I just suggest that the more verbiage you put in there, the more problematic it can be. Yes.
Changing the agenda, you said 2/3 vote, but it's really not proper to add things to an agenda that weren't published for the meeting.
Well, I'm just telling you Robert's Rules of Order, and parliamentary procedure. Robert says that once you have an agenda that all the council members got their agenda probably 2 or 3 or 5 days ahead of time, and they've looked at it and all that, and they come, and any council member can make an addition or change to the agenda. Here's your point. They can make a change to the agenda or to the consent agenda And the mayor will say, okay, are there any other proposed changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted as amended. So yeah, anybody can make changes to the agenda until it's adopted, and then it takes, like I said, 2/3 to add stuff to it. Now, whether it's right to add stuff to something that the public hasn't seen or not, I don't think so.
It's a regularly scheduled meeting. You can change the agenda at the meeting. That's not,
A
doesn't violate
violation.
the open meetings.
What about the part about 18 hours in advance having to?
Special meeting. So for some reason you need to repair the dam. You'll need a special meeting, you know, so 18 hours for that.
Okay,
Well, if you wanna purchase a fire truck, then Joe Schmo raises his hands and says, I'd like to I wanna put that fire truck purchase on the agenda.
yes, you can do that, and with a 2/3 vote of the rest of
Each member can make the, you know, motion to add.
No, council person.
Yeah.
So that could go on, so city council could actually act on that
Yes,
new item without going as was mentioned, going to public.
yes, it's not a good idea.
If they're wise, they won't.
It doesn't violate the open meeting.
Yeah, the question was, does that violate the Open Meetings Act, right? Yeah, no, adding things to the agenda, after it's been adopted, adding things to the agenda with a 2/3 vote, because that assumes, when you get a 2/3 vote or unanimous consent, which means everybody agrees, then, hey, that, the whole council wants to do it, or the majority wants to do it, they have the authority to do that. Not,
Just because you can,
yes,
doesn't make it right.
yes.
Exactly.
Well, that doesn't quite fit. I mean, just because this is not wrong to do. All right. Yeah, but just because you can do it doesn't make it wise. Yes,
My experience, a lot of things that get added are things like a committee report that somebody wants to make, or a letter to the commissioner or something.
that would get added later or something. Yeah, yeah, committee reports, they should be known ahead of time and they should be on the agenda, but if one committee says, oh, you know what? I need to make this report, they can add that if 2/3 agree.
Well,
Okay.
actually, you only need a majority at the beginning of the.
Oh, yes, you're right. You're right. You only need a majority vote to add things to the agenda before it's adopted by majority vote. And then once it's adopted by majority vote, then it takes 2/3 vote to add or subtract later.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, moving right along. I want to say something about civility. Now, I don't know how this is gonna, that doesn't work out right very well, but I had all these great pictures up there of angry citizens and all that. And I had this one great picture up there of a city council. Actually, it was from the Tampa City Council. And there's one guy over here pointing like this, and the guy next to him saying, calm down, calm down. And the city attorney over here is probably counting billable hours. And the city clerk down here, city clerk is watching it all play out on live stream and going, oh, no. So I was gonna say, don't let your meetings become like that. And your meetings are not like that. Instead, let's concentrate on civility. And it's more than being polite, it's being able to disagree without being disagreeable. And face it, everybody that comes to your council meetings has strong opinions, or they wouldn't be here. Whether they're up here or out there. So they're gonna have different opinions and they're gonna disagree, but you gotta be able to do it with respect. And Roberts goes a long way to making sure everybody's voice is heard, because everybody gets to speak first before anybody speaks the second time. By rule. Okay, and that's gonna go a lot to what the responsibility of the chair is, the mayor in this case, is the mayor is going to have the authority, the assertiveness to control the conversation. And if 2 or 3 people, the council members are talking to each other, you say, excuse me, I can't hear both of you. And it's your turn to talk, then it's yours, okay. Okay, these are some of the rules of debate. You need to be recognized. And how do you get recognized? Well, if I'm a council member, I say, Mr. Mayor. And maybe 3 or 4 people are saying, Mr. Mayor, all at the same time. Well, it's the mayor's responsibility to call on somebody. Okay, Slattery, council member Slattery. You made the motion, so you have an opportunity to speak first to that motion. Or, Councilmember Slattery, you spoke, the last speaker spoke in opposition to this motion. Would you like to speak in favor of it? And go back and forth that way. Or Councilmember Slattery, everybody else has spoken once, you haven't spoken yet, you can speak. So there's rules for who gets to speak, but it's the chair's responsibility to know those rules and recognize the speaker before that speaker speaks. And it's the speaker's responsibility to just be patient, get recognized, and then speak, and then sit down or be quiet. Okay. Address all your remarks through the chair. You know, even if I'm a council member, and even if I have a question of the finance director, I don't say, hey, Mr. Finance Director, I say, Mr. President, would the finance director tell us about the budget for this and this project or whatever the question is? Okay, you address that question through the chair. Okay, only talking about the pending motion or question, it's called here, and you don't talk about or attack people's motives. For example, if the question is whether or not to give the DPW director a raise. Okay, I'm a council member and I want to give the, how do I say this? I know that Smith's reasons for wanting to give the DPW director a raise is because he knows the DPW director is going to retire and his brother-in-law is in line for the job. Okay, and you can't say that. You can't attack that motive. You just talk about the value of the DPW director and whether he should have a raise or not. Don't attack motives. Don't disturb the assembly. And that's more than just throwing shoes. That's that crosstalk stuff. You know, that disturbs the assembly. You should try to refrain from doing that. And this last one, I don't know, do you do that here? Do you refer to each other as Councilmember Smith or Councilmember Shreels, Councilmember DeMore, Mayor Murphy? You should. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear you do that. You should. And why? Because that elevates the discussion. And that lets your public know that you're taking this seriously. You're not just sitting around drinking coffee and shooting the breeze. Use use titles and proper names. Yes.
I want to bring up a point, in listening to what you presented, I believe you're assuming that the discussion starts with a motion, as I believe Robert's rule says. We typically in the city of Petoskey we have an agenda item, but we don't start with a motion. We start with discussion, and then typically at some point, someone feels comfortable making a motion based on the discussion.
That's very
We have
common.
an informal approach.
That's very common. That's very, very common. In fact, your rules of procedure say, or somewhere it says, I read in there that says items will be presented and discussed and then voted on to that. Okay. What shouldn't happen is that initial presentation turn into debate. You know, if I'm presenting the fact that, yeah, I'm going to be making this motion to buy a red fire truck and it's going to come up la-di-da-di-da and whatever the details I want to present, somebody else should not be allowed to say, no, I think that's a bad idea. You shouldn't do that. And somebody else say, yeah, you should. We haven't had a fire truck in 25 years. Yeah, that's debate. That stuff happens after the motion is made.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then we come to a motion.
Yeah.
I think our bylaws, or rules and procedures state that we generally adopt Robert's rules, or there's some laxity.
Yeah.
And that's the line of the city. I think it's not a bad thing the way it's done.
Okay.
And I think there's an uncomfortableness that people have with an initial motion before discussion. But I think that occurs because a lot of people aren't comfortable amending motions and going through the whole process. But I don't know that it's a bad thing. A lot of people are Robert's rules experts like you.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. And I'm not here to tell you to take something that's working for you and change it. You know, if that works for you, that works for you. But that's one of the things I think that leads to those verbose meeting minutes is all that discussion, maybe even before a motion is made. Roberts technically would say, no, you have a few introductory remarks, somebody will make a motion, and somebody will second it. Because unless you got at least two people wanting to talk about it, you should just move on. I'm here to help you try to make your meetings more effective and shorter, you know, hopefully. Okay, and so as soon as you know that as soon as somebody's willing to make a motion, they should be making that motion and limit that preliminary debate to some extent. Okay, once somebody makes a motion, they're entitled to speak first. The seconder is not get the same courtesy, but the maker gets to speak first. Now, I might make a motion that we buy a yellow fire truck because I think it's the stupidest idea there is. But I might want to make that motion and Councilmember Smith might want to second that motion just to get it on the table for discussion and get it voted down. But if I make a motion, we buy a yellow fire truck because I think it's stupid, I can't then say, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a stupid idea and I just did that to get it up for discussion. I can vote against it, but I can't speak against it. Okay? All right. And then another thing that the chair should do is somebody speaks for something, then somebody speaks against it. And try to go back and forth. And in fact, it says that in your rules somewhere, I think. I think I saw that. And that's what Robert says. You don't want 4 people ganging up in a row voting, saying, no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't, we shouldn't. And then, does anybody want to speak in favor of it? No. Try to go back and forth. That helps keep the discussion healthy and balanced. Okay, Roberts, okay, you only speak a second time after everybody's spoken once. That's hard to do when everybody's speaking. Which are these?
Okay.
I just bought one.
You're good.
My salary. You know, no, that's hard to do when everybody's trying to speak at once. And we were Chris and I were at a meeting not too long ago when they were having that issue of all the council members speaking back and forth. And council members would be calling on the DPW director. I think John has something to offer here. You know, council members are doing that. And we told the presiding officer, you got to be more assertive. You control who's the mayor? Where's Mr. Murphy here? Hey, Mr. Murphy. Yes. And we had to tell her that she in this case needed to be more assertive and not let that crosstalk go on, because that's what making their meetings draw out and long and long and long, and looked really bad on YouTube where I saw it. It's like, no, that wasn't here. That would not happen here. I'm not saying it would. I'm just using that as an example. That okay, yeah, I watched those meetings and I thought, man.
You are a nerd.
I watched them in preparation for me going to talk to them.
Yeah.
To find out what I had to talk about.
Research.
If I had found your meetings, I looked at your meetings, but I looked at your minutes and your agendas and I knew all I needed to know. You run a good ship. Yeah, tight. Oh, let's call it that. All right, Chris went through these, so I'm not gonna spend much time on it. The rules, and you have them in your packet here. One thing I do want to emphasize is recognize members and assign the floor. That's a very important responsibility of the chair. And number 4, you can't state the motion too many times. It's so important that every member who's voting knows exactly what they're voting on or what amendment they're voting on and what the effect of that vote's gonna have on the motion or the action. In fact, when you're ready to take the vote, say, is there any more debate? Okay, are you ready for the question to buy a red fire truck? The motion is on the question is on the motion to buy a red fire truck. If we approve it, we're gonna buy a red fire truck. Okay, and you're stated over and over. And then once you voted, okay, the ayes have it, we will buy a red fire truck. And make sure, that was another question, another issue that same community we were just at. They said, once we voted, we're not really sure what we voted on. No wonder, everybody's talking. Okay, anyway, enforce decorum, you gotta enforce that decorum and the rules of order. There are rules for debate that we just went through. Respond to inquiries. If somebody has a parliamentary inquiry or a point of order, it's up to the presiding officer to make a ruling, or if you're unsure or unwilling, and that you can be because it's a controversial thing, turn it back to the group and say, okay, the point of order was that last vote should have been a majority vote, 2/3, and we just did it by majority. The chair is unwilling to make a ruling on that. What do you want to do, basically? And you take a vote, one way or the other. So you can turn it back over because the group is paramount, not even above the chair. Okay, motions. We're done at 8:30, right?
Mhm.
Okay. We're not gonna be done at 8:30 at this rate. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
This Alden wants to speak.
Yes.
I saw that there was a change. It used to be where you said, please give us your full name and your full address.
You
And I
can't,
saw I just saw there was some ruling that said all you have to do is ask for a name, period. Is that correct?
actually, you can attend a meeting and not ever give your name. Attend the meeting. You set your own rules for citizen comment.
Okay.
I think in 28 years, when I ever said, would you state your name and where you're from? I never had anybody.
I'm not telling you. Yeah.
I think if you ask politely,
Yeah.
most people do.
Take whatever they give you. If they say, I'm from Emmett County, or I'm not, outside the city limits, or I live in a city, is that enough?
I'm from
That's
Paul.
funny, and
Yeah.
you don't have to be a resident of Petoskey
Right.
in order to speak at your meeting.
Right, okay.
Yeah, bottom line is you can ask them, and they don't have to tell you.
Okay.
Okay, and I know it says in your rules of order that they
gonna change that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, motions. Call to action. I don't know how this is gonna work with just being a PDF, but okay, there are 5 types of motions. Main motions that introduce new items. I move we buy decorative, tables and benches for the parks. Secondary motions that allow you to change those, and the classic there is to amend. Because very few motions are perfect right out of the gate, and they take tweaking, they take changing, they take amending. And Robert spends more time and more pages in this book about talking about amends and amendments than on anything else, because they're the ones that really perfect motions. Okay, incidental motions are the ones that allow you to question procedure. They don't really have anything to do with the business at hand. Like you can say, point of order. I question procedure. Point of order, I don't think we did that right. Or I call for the orders of the day. Sounds fancy. It means let's get back on the schedule. Let's get back on the agenda. We're out of order. We're out of order on the agenda. Okay. Things like a question procedure. Privileged motions are ones that are motions that affect, they give you the opportunity to affect how comfortable you are or how effective you can be in the meeting. For example, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Slattery, technically I'd say, point of personal privilege, it's so darn hot in here, I can't think. Basically, he'd probably just say, Mr. Mayor, it's hot, that's a privileged motion. Or it's too loud, there's people talking in the hall and I can't hear. Or there's a fire in the wastebasket, those are privileged motions. They're urgent, but they don't really have anything to do with the pending business. And then the ones down here allow you to to change your mind. Even if you voted on something and it was unanimous, you can still change your mind on it. All right, let's look at this goldenrod sheet. Does everybody get a copy of this goldenrod sheet? This is really good. Stuff. Okay. The front page basically on the left-hand column is a procedure for a meeting. What the chair does, what the participants do.
Am I off? Is that me?
I'm off. Let's go back. I'm way ahead. I'm these guys, right?
Yep.
Okay, I was way ahead. The far left is the front page. It's basically how to run the procedure for a meeting, plus some of those parliamentary procedural things that I mentioned on my first slide. The back is an example of a typical meeting, and this is good reading sometime over with a cup of coffee, and this is how a well-run meeting can be done. Okay. On the inside, though, is what I want to talk about. That's these two tables. The leftmost table is ranking motions. The right table is non-ranking motions. And what that means is that these are in order of rank, and anything above a particular motion is in order when that motion is pending. For example, if I make a motion, a main motion, new idea, anything above it is in order. Somebody can amend or move to amend it, to commit it to a committee, to lay it on the table, to adjourn, even to adjourn. But if I'm up here talking about calling the previous question, which we'll get to, somebody says question and you're debating that, the ones below it are not in order. So that's just a ranked order. Okay. Over here, these are not ranked, they're non-ranked, they're just they're all always in order anytime. Now, what's important here is those 6 columns. And those 6 columns are the key characteristics of every motion, any motion. Can you interrupt the speaker? Yes or no? And on, leave that, okay, just look like that. Can it interrupt the speaker? The leftmost column, and if it has an I in it, you can interrupt the speaker with that motion. Like I raised, call for the orders of the day. Mr. Mayor, call for the orders of the day. I can interrupt somebody that's talking. I want to get back on track. Okay? Most of them, you can't interrupt the speaker. Some you can. Is it debate, does it require a second? Not everything requires a second, but you'll see all of the secondary motions, main motion and all of the secondary motions require seconds, but hardly any of these non-ranking motions require seconds because they're my concern. They're my motion. Like if for example, I have point of order. I think we're doing things wrong. It's over on the right-hand side, about in the middle. That's my point of order. I don't have somebody else to say, yeah, you're right. That's mine. It doesn't require a second. Okay, third, is it amendable? 4, is it amendable? No. 3, is it debatable? You'd think everything in Robert's rules, which is all about debate, everything would be debatable. But if you look at that, very few are really debatable issues. If I move to adjourn, that's not going to be debated. You're either going to do it or you're not. And so that column is about whether it's debatable or not. Then is something amendable? Can you change it with an amendment? Very few of these are amendable. But hardly any of the non-ranking motions are, because they deal with urgent concerns, a lot of them. Or my confusion. Okay, then what threshold is required is important. Most things require a majority vote, which in Petoskey requires 3, because pardon me? Count to 3? I know, I had a council member who used to say that with 3 votes, actually, no, 4 votes, you can do anything. Count to 3, count to 4. Yeah, so I know it takes a quorum to do anything. And if you've only got a quorum, it takes all of you to vote for it to take action. Okay, so that's a majority vote. 3 out of the 5. But some things require a 2/3. And how do you know? What's the rule of thumb to when something's a majority vote or a 2/3 vote? It's like this. If something is going to take away my rights to continue debating, it's going to require a 2/3 vote to do it. Like for somebody to call the question, which means stop debate. That takes a 2/3 vote of the group to stop debate. Or to limit debate or extend debate, 2/3 vote, because it's changing my right to vote. Or if it's going to undo something you previously did, like rescind, it takes a 2/3 vote under certain conditions, and we'll get to that. Okay, so that's the rule of thumb. If it's limiting me or changing something we already did, it's going to be a 2/3 vote. And most things can't be reconsidered or some. You see what's in the 6th column. Some can, some can't. The little asterisk under the R means go back and look at the book, because there are special rules about that. Okay. Okay. Let's see, moving on. We were doing so well. Okay. Handling a motion, a main motion. A member gets recognized. Slattery. I say, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor. The mayor says, Councilmember Slattery. Now I'm recognized. Now I can speak and make a motion. I say, Mr. Mayor, I move that we buy decorative benches and tables for the park. And the mayor says, is there a second? Or maybe somebody over here just yells out, second. Because the second doesn't require a recognition. Anybody can just shout it out. Usually it's this whole half of the room seconds it, Okay, move we adjourn. Second, Okay. Okay, then the chair states the motion. It's moved and seconded that we do such and such. So state the motion very clearly and succinctly. You might, if it's complicated, have the maker of the motion write it down and give it to the clerk. If it's complicated, because it's so important that everybody know exactly what you're voting on. Okay, so anyway, it's moved and seconded. Is there any debate? And then the mayor will also say, Councilmember Slattery, you made the motion. You can speak first in your motion if you want to, or you wish to, or whatever. And I'll say, I don't know, I might say yes, I might just not. Any other debate? And then according to those rules that we talked about earlier about who gets to be assigned the floor and whether you voted for it and whether you've spoken yet or not, you debate it. Until the mayor says, is there any further debate? And nobody has any further debate. And then the chair says, all right, there's no further debate. The motion is on the question to buy tables and chairs for the park. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Some say aye. All those opposed say nay. Some say nay or no. And some say nay or no. And then the chair said, or you do a roll call vote. And you do a roll call vote here pretty much all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that in your rules.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We're doing it for everything.
Yeah, yeah, everything. Some communities do that on everything. Some communities have a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Maybe you do too.
No.
No, not that
I
one.
just say, I was told this is legal to say, no further business become from this, in front of this council, this meeting is adjourned.
That's called unanimous consent, and that's an awesome thing to do. Yes,
Okay.
that's a perfectly okay. I wish every group did that. I wish every group I was in did that. I know.
Yeah. Go to jail.
So we're. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's a good thing to do. That's a very good, you can do that on any motion. You can, a lot of groups do that to approve the minutes. You've seen the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no corrections, the minutes are approved as read or as distributed. And you can actually do that on any motion, even big ticket items. We've been talking about buying a fire truck for 3 months. It's time to buy one or not. Unless there's any objection, we're buying a red fire truck, and you can assume a motion to buy a red fire truck and approve it by unanimous consent, because if everybody consents, that's more than a majority, that's more than 2/3, that's everybody. And if somebody objects, you just vote on it normally. Okay, so, those in favor, call the roll. Okay, then you announce the result of the vote, all the ayes have it, and this is what will happen. Always say, that was one of the other things that in this community, they didn't know what they were supposed to do next after they voted on something. We voted to do something, but whose court is the ball in? Okay, so state what's going to happen as a result of the vote. The ayes have it, and the fire chief will give us information about buying the red fire truck. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Sometimes when someone votes no, they wanted to say the reason, which is, I think, for people there. So they might have been fundamentally for parts of the motion, but there was this one thing and they wanted to make it clear. Do you think that's appropriate, or?
I don't think it's appropriate, but I wouldn't kick them out of the room for doing it. I had one council member who invariably would say, my heart says yes and my head says no, when she voted, and I don't know. I had another council member who I swore wore a WWJD bracelet, because what would Joe do? And she wouldn't vote until Joe voted, and invariably voted the way Joe did, But when it's time to vote, once the chair puts the question to a vote, it's time to vote, yay or nay. Your time to debate, which is what that is cloaking, getting one more kick in, or something, is really over. That's really not appropriate, but it's, probably not a finable offense. Okay, we're gonna be moving along here, or we're gonna be here longer than you want it to be. Okay, amendment, secondary motions, the main one there is to amend. And we might not talk about all of these, but these are all so good. You need to know these. These are so useful to you. Amend to postpone indefinitely means you want to just get rid of a motion, basically. You want it to go away, so you move to postpone it indefinitely. Okay, you can do that. And then one's indefinite. There is no indefinite, so it might not ever come back. Okay, to postpone to a definite time is what you should be doing most of the time when somebody says move to table. What they really mean is I want to postpone this to the next meeting, or I want to postpone it till later in this meeting. But instead, we've gotten the habit of saying, I move that we table this until the next meeting. Well, table's not exactly the right motion. Table is for example, you're debating something and the governor walks in, or Chris walks in, and you want to hear from the governor or Chris. And so somebody would say, I move we table that motion until after we hear from our speaker. Okay, and it gets a second and it's approved. You put it on the table and it's gone away for a minute and we hear the governor or whoever, what the inner business is. And then somebody should say, I move that we take this from the table and continue debate on it. That's what tabling really is. Okay, postponing to a definite time is what people mean when they say table. But postpone to a definite time, you can only postpone it to the next meeting. You can't postpone something till 6 months from now, just to the next meeting. Previous question is one where you've been debating something back and forth and somebody just tired of debating and they want to just vote. So they invariably from the back of the room call, question. Or if they're very articulate, I call the question. So, well, if the presiding officer doesn't exactly know how to handle that, they might throw up their hands and say, well, I guess we have to vote, and they'll vote. The real way to handle that is, okay, the motion, the previous question has been called. Is there a second? It requires a second. And if there's a second, then it requires a 2/3 vote to stop debate. And if it gets a 2/3 vote, then the next words out of the mayor's mouth should be, okay, the question's been called, it was approved. Now we're voting on whatever it was we had been debating, to buy those tables and chairs, maybe, whatever. That's previous question. But let's talk about amend for a second. There's 3 ways to amend something. You can either insert, you have a motion on the floor. I move that we buy 12 decorative benches for downtown parks. There are 3 ways to amend that. You can either insert words, like the words and tables after benches, to make the motion that we buy 12 decorative benches and tables for downtown parks. Or you can strike out words, like strike out parks. And so then the motion would become, I move that we, if the motion to amend by striking out, in this case, is approved, then the amended motion is that we buy 12 decorative benches and tables for downtown. Parks is gone. Then you would vote on the amendment first. And if that's approved, then you vote on the amended motion. Okay, does that make sense? It's a 2-step thing. And then, like I said, there's 3 ways to amend it: by inserting words like we did a minute ago, like striking out words like in this example, or by striking something out and adding words in its place, substituting. But somebody might say, you know, as long as we're gonna buy, and they're thinking to themselves, as long as we're gonna buy decorative tables and benches, or benches, whatever it is, why don't we make them commemorative and honor our local heroes? So I move that we strike out decorative and add commemorative. And if that gets a second, the motion to amend gets a second, then you debate it and you vote on it. Then the amended motion becomes that we buy 12 decorative benches for downtown parks. And those 3 can be, you can do all 3 of those in various motions in one, but these are 3 different separate examples. 3 ways to amend something. You can add words, you can strike out words, or you can strike out something and add something in its place. 3 different ways to amend something. And you vote on the amendment first, one at a time, then you vote on the amended motion. If the amendment fails, you vote on the motion as it was without being changed, the original motion. That's all. Simple as that. Now, Roberts gets into a thing where you can amend an amendment and all that stuff. You can't do more than that because your smoke would come out of your ears and it would be really confusing. You ever have friendly amendments? Somebody just says, I want to move a friendly, like we were going to buy 12 decorative benches and tables, and somebody says to themselves, you know what, if we had 14, we could put 2 of them by the statue of the parliamentarian. And this is, I want to make a friendly amendment, because they don't want to rock the boat. They know it's just a little tiny change. And so they'll say, I make a friendly amendment. Is that okay with the maker of the motion? And the maker will go, yeah, it's okay with me. That's not the way you handle it. You handle it like a regular amendment. And if everybody agrees with it, you approved it by unanimous consent. And you just add it like a regular motion. You change 12 to 14 as a substitute kind of a thing. Because once the motion is stated by the chair, it's moved and seconded that we buy decorative benches and 12 decorative benches and tables for downtown, it doesn't belong to the maker and the seconder anymore. It belongs to the whole group. So the maker and the seconder got no proprietary ownership. Postpone indefinitely, that's one that we talked about a minute ago, to kill a motion. To postpone to which one have I got? I got this one. Okay, table. We talked about the difference between tabling something versus postponing something. You really want to postpone most of the time when you say table. Oh, and Coco, my friend at the league, who was a parliamentarian, would always say, she would say, clear the table. If you've tabled something, you need to clear the table before the end of the meeting. You know, anything you've tabled should be taken off the table at that meeting. Okay. Previous question, that's called the question. We talked about that. Okay, then the incidental motions, the main one here, or the classic, is point of order. That means I think we've done something wrong, and it's the chair's job or the mayor's job at that point to make a ruling. Your point is well taken, or your point is not well taken. And you've heard that phrase before in regular life, right? Your point's well taken. Well, that's where it comes from, Robert's Rules of Order. That means, yes, I agree. Your point is valid. Okay, now if he makes a ruling that the point is well taken, somebody can then disagree and say, I appeal. I appeal from the decision of the chair. And then you vote on it. And a yes vote The mayor would say, the decision of the chair has been appealed from, what do you say? Yes or no? And a yes vote says I sustain the mayor's decision, and no vote says I overturn it. So ultimately, the group overrides the presiding officer. Okay? All right, privilege motion, like, there's a fire in the wastebasket, or it's too hot in here. Those are point of privilege order, that's a question of privilege. It's too hot, or it's too cold, or I can't hear, or there's a fire, whatever, and it's a privilege motion, okay? And calling for the orders of the day, I mentioned that also earlier. That's just, you're looking at the agenda, and we're talking about number 6, and we didn't even talk about 3 and 4 yet. Call for the orders of the day. We need to get back on track. Okay. Okay. Question of privilege, we just talked about that, and to adjourn. And Mayor, I love the way you do that. I wish more groups did it. It says if there's no other business to come before us, and we're adjourned. What if somebody says, yeah, I've got an item, then what do you do?
Next week.
Next week. I'm sorry, we adjourned. You're done. No. You would just, you could do a couple of different things. You could take a vote. All those that want to adjourn, say yes. All those don't, say no. And if the ayes have it, you adjourn, and his order would have, or question would wait. Or you would do the polite thing and say, what's your point? Or what do you want to add?
I'd say what,
Yeah.
maybe we should put something on the agenda for next month.
Yeah, I'd put it on the agenda for the next meeting. That's right. Okay, and to adjourn. All right. Oh, am I doing this? Okay, okay. Oh, motions that bring something back. We're gonna talk about 2 in particular, rescind and, reconsider and rescind. Okay. Reconsider and rescind, and take from the table we've already talked about. Reconsider and rescind, they're different in that you can reconsider, you can reconsider something at that meeting. If you've taken a vote to buy 12 decorative tables, and easy for me to say, and benches for downtown, and then somebody gets to start thinking, well, wait a minute, we can't afford that. That person who voted on the winning, prevailing side can say, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Slattery, Mr. Mayor, I move that we reconsider our vote, our earlier decision to buy 12 decorative tables and benches for downtown. I voted on the prevailing side, and that's important. Because only somebody who voted on the prevailing side, which means the winning side, which means if it was something that was approved that you're reconsidering, the winning side was those who voted yes. If it's something that was denied earlier, the winning side in that case was somebody who voted no. So only somebody who voted on the prevailing side, and it's done in that same meeting, can bring up a motion to reconsider. Yes. Yes, any point in the meeting. But at that meeting. Okay, it requires a second and just a majority vote. Okay, to rescind is a little different. There's no time limit on rescinding, and anybody can bring it up. Like if we voted to buy these 12 decorative tables and benches, whatever it was, this meeting, next month or 2 months or 3 months from now, somebody can say, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Slattery, I move that we rescind that decision to buy those 12 decorative tables and benches. Okay, I didn't vote on the prevailing side. I voted against it because I thought it was stupid and we couldn't afford it. And we did it anyway. I move that we rescind that. Okay, it's at a different meeting. The kicker or the catch, I guess, is that if something has been done that makes it impossible to undo, then you can't use rescind. For example, if you've already bought those tables and chairs, you can't rescind that. Or if the motion, the decision you're rescinding is to tear down the building at 2nd and Main, and you've already torn down the building, you obviously can't rescind that. Or if you've even this is for you, if you let bids or signed a contract or taken any action toward doing that, you can't rescind it. Okay, yes.
Policy, budgetary, example, so flavor, right? So what about an ordinance? You create an ordinance to allow or disallow something, and that be rescinded?
That's a good question. I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
At any time in the future.
At any time.
Yeah, at any time. Rescind is rescind is rescind. But here's another kicker is that if you give notice, you can do it with just a majority vote. But if you don't give notice that you're going to be considering this rescission, this rescinding, then it takes a 2/3 vote. In other words, you need to give everybody that wants to be there an opportunity to be there. Okay,
They could be on the agenda.
yes, yes. Well, wait a minute, does it have to be on the agenda?
For the majority vote.
Oh, no, to give notice? The way you give notice is it's in the call of the meeting, or it's on the agenda, or it's in a cover letter, or it's in, you mentioned it at this meeting that we're gonna do it at next meeting. Let's notice. Okay, we talked about okay, all this voting stuff, you all do a mostly roll call vote and you know all that, but, so we're gonna kind of skip through that because it's time to go home. The thing about abstentions, though, I do want to mention abstentions. Your charter, section 26 on ethics, which is very good, and 26.5 in particular, and public acts, state laws, have things to say about conflict of interest. Your charter says that, I think, it's decided by other members of the council that don't have that conflict, as to whether or not you have a conflict or not. That's how my Mount Morris charter had it as well. But these laws, you need to know, you can go to jail for violating those laws too. One has to do with conflict of interest, you personally. You can't take bribes, you can't take gifts, you can't have any special benefit. The other has to do with how you relate to contracts. So you need to know those two laws. Okay, the thing, always ask for the negative when you're doing a voice vote, even if it's obvious, Mr. Mayor. You always ask for the negative. And then it's stated in the minutes, okay? Okay, voice vote, roll call, you know about that. We talked about unanimous consent. You can use unanimous consent for anything, really. And if there's any objection, if it's not unanimous, you just vote on it. Typical. Okay, it's easy. Okay, common mistakes to avoid. Don't mix up reconsider and rescind. They're very different for different purposes. Use postpone instead of table. You'll be thought highly of if you do that. Don't misuse call the question. You don't do that. You don't use friendly amendments here very often. Here's one. Don't adopt a financial report. I don't know if you do that at a meeting. Do you have on your agenda adoption of the financial report? I didn't know. I didn't see whether that was there or not. Okay, you shouldn't do that. And the reason you shouldn't is the reason I won't ever vote to approve a financial report is I can't vouch for the treasurer's or the financial officer's numbers. That's not my job. I'm not a professional money looker-atter, auditor. So what you do is when you get the financial report, you don't receive it, you don't do anything. You say that the financial report will be placed on file for the annual audit.
So it's just a communication.
Pardon?
It's just on for
It's
communication.
on for communication. Yeah, basically it's for information.
Put it off of the consent agenda.
No, yeah, you should take it off the.
What if you
It's, uh,
consider a treasurer financial report as a check register, but that is their duty to approve the check register, isn't it?
Quarterly report.
Revenue expenditure report.
Some councils move to, or consider paying the bills, you know, and that's one thing, but a financial report that says the balance was this, we had these expenditures. And these expenses, our new balance is such and such, that's a financial report, I consider.
It's the quarterly.
The quarterly report, I wouldn't approve that. I would just file that, and at the end of the year, you approve a financial report on behalf of the whole city.
Is there somebody from the council that wishes to have, I think there was somebody requested the quarterly reports, however.
You can have them,
They're monthly. They're monthly.
yeah, you just don't approve them as a council,
You don't approve them.
yeah, you file them. Pardon?
So that was worth saying.
You hand them out, you don't discuss them, you just hand them out.
That was worth saying here for?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
You hand them out, you don't discuss them, it's just.
Well, you can discuss them if you want, you just don't vote and approve them. Yeah, that's all, that's all. And then don't do the court transcript type of minutes. Okay, last two slides. One, pop quiz. Oh. Okay, no, it doesn't. Okay, the final authority is who? The group, the rules committee, the parliamentarian, or the chair? The group, good, that's right. And that's where it is in Roberts, chapter 23 verses 1-13. It's the group. And then, am I doing that? No, you're doing that. I gave you some resources and, oh, I wanted to say this. Here's how you can make your meetings more meaningful. You're good. You got it, Shane. Know your rules of procedure and know your charter. You have to know that. If you're on council or on any board or committee that's running the city, or as part of the city government and stuff, you know your rules. Speak to and through the chair, one person at a time. Be a bit formal like you are, but not too formal, and then always treat each other with respect. And for that, I want to say thank you all for treating me with respect and allowing us to be here tonight. And thank you for sticking around until after 8:30 on a beautiful, beautiful evening. And God bless you all.
I know I speak for everybody to say thank you very much. You brought a lot of wealth of knowledge that none of us all had any of all of this. And I say thank you to you, both of you, for coming here. Thank you very much.
As Chris said, you have sign-in sheets. Make sure you sign the sign-in sheets, and we do have evaluations.
Yep, there's some evaluations forms on the table outside. Feel free to take one, get it back to me at some point.
Unless you evaluate, this is as good as it gets.
Being no further business come from this council, I call this meeting.